27th day of January, 2022. Please rise if you're able and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. All right, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Schneiderman.
Here.
Councilwoman McNamara. Present. Councilman Martell.
Here.
Councilman Bouvier.
Here.
Councilman Schiavone.
Present. Hi, everyone.
Just in time.
All right, everybody's here.
Just in time. Thank you, Sonny.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so we're gonna start this morning with a COVID update. Well, I have a feeling we're also gonna get a little bit of a storm update too. So we've got Ryan Murphy, our public safety director here, who's been our COVID coordinator and our emergency coordinator. So Ryan, you got two roles to play this morning. So go ahead.
Sure. We'll do a Snowvid update. So it's, I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. No, that was easy.
That's bad.
But so as far as COVID goes, good news. The numbers are going down. Spread seems to have obviously, peaked out and is on the decline now. This is in line with the predictions from the medical community. They expected that based on the incredibly high saturation rates and the rate of spread in the population that we were going to see a rather sharp decline in that spread as of like the end of January, beginning of February. And I think we are seeing indicators of that. For a little while there, we had actual health department reported daily positive numbers for the town of Southampton that were 250 new positives a day or in excess of that. And a reminder that none of that and none of the data still includes necessarily the people that are taking home tests. These are all positive tests being revealed from testing at actual medical clinic facilities that are doing testing. So we were in excess of 250 a day at one point, and now the most recent 2-day average is 40 positives per day. The 7-day average for the town of Southampton is approximately 57 new positives per day based on the Suffolk County Health Department data. So that's a big drop off. The hospital is reporting seeing the same sort of things. We've consistently throughout the pandemic relied on Southampton Hospital for more of a local sense of what's going on. They're our local barometer for what's happening with COVID. And they're seeing a similar thing. And as far as the demand for testing, we're also seeing a big drop off in that. The first day that the Red Creek Park testing site was open, which was the former Gabreski testing site relocated to Red Creek, they did approximately 560 tests. That was the Monday following New Year's Eve. As of this Monday, around 3:30 in the afternoon, they had only been up to approximately 60 tests given that day. We know that they ended the second week of testing. We went from 560 the first week. The second week, they ended around 250, 260 tests. The third week was down even from there. And then, this past Monday, as of about 3:30, it was 60 tests had been administered. They're only open until 6 o'clock at night. So we were through the majority of the day at that point and only at the 60 test point. My guess is they probably closed the day out somewhere around, maybe 100 exams, if that. There might not have been that heavy of a demand from 3:30 on. Hospital COVID numbers for Southampton Hospital. As of 2 days ago, the 25th, they had 20 COVID positive individuals in the hospital. 4 of those people were in ICU, and 1 of the 4 was on a vent. Still higher numbers all around than we'd love to see, but a decrease. And it's important to remember that, of those 20 COVID positive people in the hospital, some of them could be people that are in for something else. They are in because of a slip and fall or whatever may have happened to them. And they also now happen to have COVID, or they may have walked in the door with it. They might have gotten it since they've been there, who knows? But they may not have been admitted to the hospital because of their COVID. They may have been admitted for something else, and COVID is just a coexisting condition with whatever they walked in with. So it's not necessarily that they're there specifically to be treated for COVID. I just think it's worth noting that, so that we take kind of a maybe less panicked or a measured approach to some of this data, and look at the positive side of the fact that things are trending downward for us right now. At that current rate for Red Creek Park, I haven't had a conversation with the county. I know when we went into this, they intended on keeping that site open, into and through February. I don't know if that's still their intention. I know at some of the other sites that they have going, they've actually, cut back from 1 day to 2 days of availability because the demand just isn't there to continue to sustain the operation 2 days a week. So my hope is that they still intend to keep the site open, through February. I think it's a valuable thing just to have as another alternative for people in the community. And we'll certainly push for that with them. They haven't indicated otherwise. So hopefully we're on track for that still, but we'll keep everybody posted if it changes. Any COVID questions? All right. Hopefully people also got on to the federal site and requested their, at-home kits too. We put that information out as well. As far as the snow goes, we're still 2 days out. So there's still a decent degree of uncertainty with the weather. We're obviously studying it quite closely because there's talk of, snowfall amounts that are in excess of, 10 to 12 inches. Some of the predictions are indicating, as of yesterday, some of the predictions were indicating, 17 or 18 inches. Some of those same places now today are trending down towards 13, 14 inches. We like that. Any decrease is a good thing. But, in excess of 6 or 7 inches is still a decent amount of snowfall for us in a day. Over the course of this event, there are some indicators that we could see, 1 inch or more per hour if it stays towards the higher end. Along with those numbers is the possibility for gusty winds near 40 miles per hour. That's not crazy. Those gusts aren't crazy. What the other factor we have to look at with that is whether or not we're going to see heavy wet snow versus lighter kind of airier snow. That makes a difference in terms of being able to push it on the roadways. Also makes a difference in terms of the way that it sits on trees, tree limbs, power lines, things like that. So our two biggest concerns right now as we approach this storm are obviously, the impacts of the snow and the snow removal and snow clearing. But secondary is the issues that we may face with regards to power outages. There's a possibility of some minor, flooding that's being discussed right now. It's basically water in all the usual places for us. We're used to this at this point. Just about any storm, we see water in certain places. I don't believe that the predictions as of this moment are indicating that we would see anything different than that. No tremendous threats to structures or houses in any parts of our community that's been articulated so far from the Weather Service, but we're really dialed into it. And actually at the same time that I'm on with you right now, there's a town emergency manager call going on with the county. I have somebody else sitting on that call for me just to get any kind of updates that they happen to have. I'm hoping that by the end of the day today, the Weather Service will have a little bit more defined forecast for us to see whether this is favoring east or west. That makes all the difference between, 20 inches of snow and 3 inches of snow, depending on which way the track shifts on it. So let's just keep our fingers crossed that it stays towards the lower numbers and stays manageable, but we are watching it. We will be having our emergency operations center open for this event based on the forecast predictions at this point. We just have not locked in on a timing for our opening.
Right, thank you, Ryan. Are you in communication with our new highway superintendent? Is he ready? Does he have what he needs to, this is his first major storm?
I'm blaming all of this snow on Charlie. Since his arrival, it seems like we've gotten bombarded. It's really been a heck of a start for him. But yes, we're definitely in communication. It's excellent to have the communication that we have with him right now. On one of the last storms, he was actually in the EOC with myself and Captain Kiernan, and we were monitoring conditions from down in the EOC. So we have good dialogue. I believe that they're, ready, other than some, any unexpected, vehicle issues that may come up or anything like that. But I'm sure that they're prepping and ready. I've been giving him any information I have. And, we're still early enough in the season, although we've had a couple of storms. I'm, based on past experience, I'm guessing we haven't depleted our supplies down to a level where it's a tremendous concern to us right now. As we get later into the season, typically that becomes a bigger issue for us when we exhaust more of our, sand and salt.
All right, any other questions for Ryan? All right, I'm not seeing any. We'll let you get on that other call with the county, so
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Thank-
All right. So we're going to move on. We actually right on schedule here. 10:15, we have a conversation scheduled regarding gas-powered snow blowers. No, I'm sorry, leaf blowers. So John, you're gonna, I think, introduce this, right? Councilman?
Yes, I am. We also have Charles, we have Dieter, and I believe Camden Ackerman from the Southampton Business Alliance, and some other guests that they brought on. I'll just open this up quickly. We've about 2 years ago, this was first introduced. Since then, many municipalities in the area have adopted a law similar to the one that Christine Scalera is going to present to you. You guys should have a draft of the law. You should also have a summary that outlines what the other municipalities in our area and our neighbors are doing. You'll see that they are all quite similar in that respect, and also similar to the pending state law, which is just a use restriction. These are use restriction laws. That's how I characterize them. The state law that is pending is really the law that I think was the basis for what we're going to present, or what Christine's going to present. I did want to update you. I've been in conversation with federal and state, particularly in the governor's office, on providing incentives. Part of this deal, obviously, we have in the town of Southampton, we have some goals for emissions reductions and energy independence. This plays into that, and the ultimate goal, obviously, and I think everybody realizes that, is to transition to electric equipment as it becomes usable, as it becomes more practical to do that. But in the course of that, the conversations I've just had in the last few days involve providing incentives to help make that happen. Similar to people buying an electric car, that you get an incentive from the government to do that. So I've been in conversations both on the federal side as well as the state side to work on those incentives to help with that transition. And I personally see it as a very incremental thing over a period of years. As the technology evolves, as battery technology evolves, it just seems like a normal course. And I think most of the businesses that are involved and homeowners, residents as well, realize that this is the way we are going. I'm also going to suggest to the board, before Christine presents, that we do an outreach program as part of this to educate residents and commercial companies, as well as to what the law means. But I should stress that most companies that are working right now are working with the laws that are in your summary page, and those laws they're used to. It helps with code enforcement because it's uniform across the board. Code enforcement is a difficult thing. I'd much rather have people be voluntarily compliant and work towards this goal of ultimately getting a law in place. It's a quality of life issue. It supports our goals of energy independence and reduction of carbon emissions. As you know, we've hired a company to give us a roadmap in that regard. And this law, I think, is very, as I said, very similar. So I will hand this over to Christine Scalera, who has been working with us for years. It seems, actually is, not only seems that way, to get this law in place. She'll describe the law, and then you're going to hear from Dieter Van Luchten, who's our chair for the Sustainability Committee. This is an initiative that came out of the Sustainability Committee, and they've been working on it for some time. I think the time is right, and you'll, as I said, you'll hear from some others as well. So, Christine, if you want to take that over, I'm going to remain uncharacteristically silent from this point on.
Okay, good morning, everybody. The law is fairly self-explanatory, but it's aimed at distinguishing gas-powered leaf blowers from other intermittently used equipment that you would normally see. So I'll just go through the major provisions of it, which are the first one is that gas-powered leaf blowers would not be used or operated within the unincorporated portions of the town of Southampton from May 20th through and including September 20th. Secondly, gas-powered leaf blowers may be used within the unincorporated portions of the town of Southampton from September 21st through and including May 19th, and they're subject to several restrictions, which are that they would be only able to be used between 8 and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, Saturdays until 5 p.m., 8 to 5, and there would be no permitted uses on Sundays or federal highways. And in addition to the draft, as John had mentioned, I provided a copy of the local municipality code excerpts from their codes on how they are and a synopsis of that, because it gets a little confusing with all the different timelines. But what we are proposing right now is consistent and in line with the same provisions as are now in place in East Hampton Town, the Village of East Hampton, and the Village of Southampton. So when John talks about the efficacy of enforcement, it is in line with those other municipalities currently as we have proposed it. So with that, Dieter can talk to you about the sustainability's job in all of this and bringing this forward.
Thank you, Christine, and good morning to you all on the council. Thank you for letting me speak. We are talking with this law only about a seasonal restriction of the use of gas leaf blowers when the leaves are virtually non-existent between roughly Memorial and Labor Day, which is consistent with all our neighbors and the laws they have in place right now. Here are some of the main reasons for those restrictions. A, it's the noise, which is way above permitted limits. And we are, let's call it a vacation community, where the quality of life is greatly reduced by the constant noise of these machines, especially during the time Memorial and Labor Day. B, it's the workers' health. Besides the noise, the gas fumes from the two-stroke diesel engines and the particles blown up are very bad for the lungs of the operators, which are mostly from low-income areas and therefore suffering badly. Then one point which is not very often mentioned is the pollution of gasoline spillings. It's quite substantial if it is added up over the course of the year. And last but not least, it's the environmental damage. They do a tremendous killing job on insects, which we all know are very, very important for our environment. And they do a substantial destruction to plants. The alternatives to the gas leaf blowers are electric blowers, and there will be no restrictions all year round. And the power of the new models is now equal to those of the gas leaf blowers. This was always an argument for the landscapers. Oh, we can't do it for they're not powerful enough, but they are these days. And importantly, the upkeep of the electric blowers is virtually negligible versus those of the gas leaf blowers. So that's an additional incentive for the landscapers to switch. As Christine just said before, Southampton is joining East Hampton, Southampton, West Hampton with identical laws, which landscapers are already used to for many years. The existing restrictions in the United States covers over 100 communities. And on the coastal communities, which are similar to ours, it's Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Oregon, and California, which have many, many restrictions, some even outright bans. What we are recommending to you is nothing new and innovative. We, the Sustainability Committee, started the process, and I have to correct John on that one, 4 years ago. We have been working on this for 4 years.
Seems like 10, Peter.
Pardon?
Seems like 10, but thank you. I apologize.
It was picked up by then Council member Christine Scalera, who had demonstrations to landscapers of electric equipment and got the town of Southampton the designation Quiet Communities. Numerous meetings with landscapers since, and respective laws of our neighbors made them well aware of the move towards electric equipment. So this, what we are putting in here now, is we are Johnny come lately to our neighbors. Normally Southampton is leading the pack, but now we are way behind everybody else to introduce that. So I think it should be an easy decision for you, the council, to put this in. It doesn't put any burdens on the landscapers. It is just continuation of what's going on all the time. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Dieter.
If there are no questions right now, I would like to hand this over to Camden Ackerman from the Southampton Business Alliance to say a few words towards this subject.
Dieter, just
Yeah, sorry, Jay.
just one question for you. I mean, you talked, and I know this is principally a noise issue, but you said there was some environmental benefits, and you talked about particulate matter, and you talked about gas spilling, but you didn't talk about two-stroke engines and the amount of carbon dioxide they produce, which, as I understand it, is one of the larger environmental concerns in terms of greenhouse gases. Is there truth to that, or?
No, it certainly is. And I mentioned it, I said it's the gas fumes from the two-stroke diesel engines, which are really bad. For one of those units can spill out as much gas as a truck going from here to Tacoma. And so that means that is a terrible CO2.
Oh, I thought you were talking about gas leakage, like spilled gasoline into the ground.
I said the fumes before, and then I said the gasoline spills when they refill them. So I mentioned both. For the CO2 from the two-stroke engines is one of the worst in the industry. They're totally outdated engines, and it's amazing that they're still being used. So that's
all right.
Well,
yeah, I can weigh in on that a little bit. Just to put it in perspective, while there have been some technological advancements in two-stroke engines, they're still highly polluting and are a big part of our emissions issue that we have. Two-stroke engines in particular. Just to put it in perspective, about a half-hour use of a gas leaf blower, something equivalent to driving a small truck across the United States, as far as emissions equivalency. So you can find all sorts of statistics that go to that. But I think to your point, Supervisor, that also is an important issue, particularly if we're going to meet the state goals of emissions reductions that we have set for the town of Southampton, as well as the state guidelines for reaching that point.
So John, and again, I know this is it's primarily driven by noise, so there's another benefit on the environmental side. This is more of a quality of life issue. Are there quiet gas-powered, two-stroke engines, leaf blowers, or? Because we're not, in the legislation, we're not regulating noise level. So if you had a quiet, gas-powered one, at least as quiet as the electric, that would still be prohibited under the law. So.
Yeah, I think Christine had her hand up.
I was just going to say, anytime anything is used, it has to be within that 65 dBs. It can't go over that under any circumstance, no matter what you're using at any time.
All right, so you're sort of taking the other position is, even if you had an electric one, but it was noisy, that would be prohibited if it's over 65 decibels.
That's just our noise ordinance. So, but
That's the noise
that usually
ordinance.
isn't the case.
But if you had a gas-powered one that was less than 65 decibels, that still would be prohibited.
Correct.
Yes.
During that season.
Right. Okay.
And as far as I know, the noise level is clear. It's hard to reduce or to keep the same amount of thrust out of a combustion engine for a turbine-driven gas leaf blower, and to maintain those sounds. I mean, it's sort of akin to the attempts to try to cut down the noise of helicopters, by attempting to feather the turbine blades and do those things. So there is work on that. As far as I understand it, it's nowhere near the 65 decibel level that's set by, which is a standard in a lot of municipalities at this time. But in conjunction with that, the emissions are still the same, and that is a big concern.
All right, John, you wanted to bring on Camden Ackerman? I don't see him in the room, so.
No,
Yeah.
not, he has, I just
said
called
he's-
him.
He
has
said he's
some-
here. I texted him. He said he's here. I asked him to raise his hand so that they would make him a panelist, but I see him now as an attendee. He has his hand up.
Okay, that means he's gotten in by telephone.
Coming in.
He's coming in, he just mentioned it.
Thank you, Charles.
Camden, are you in?
Not
You'll
yet.
see him on the screen, Dieter, when he shows up.
Okay. So I called him, he had some technical troubles.
So while we're waiting for Camden, I also want to let you know that we're part of this. We have a public hearing scheduled for February 10th. So I would encourage those for and against to speak at that time. And then, we're certainly open to hearing any changes that make sense to the law that may be suggested. But, clearly the intent here is twofold. One, obviously, is the quality of life issues, but the others is trying to meet some of the goals by the reduction of a fairly toxic exhaust from two-cycle engines. It's not just CO2, as any combustion engine is. So this is a good place to start, but also that we're able to help with that transition. As I said, I'd really love to see that be voluntary. A lot of landscapers that feel that way. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of landscaping companies, and they all recognize the need for it. It's lightweight. It's just a whole bunch of reasons that they've stated to me that they support that. So I see Camden's on here, so I'll break off.
All right, Camden, we got you. You need to unmute if you're muted. Oh, looks like you're unmuted. So go ahead, Camden.
I didn't actually have that much to say. The Southampton Business Alliance has reached out to a lot of our members. I'm not taking on their behalf a strong position for or against today, but a majority of our members that we've spoken to about this, most have already moved to the electric model. The only concern, which I've spoken to Dieter about, and it, from my understanding, is in the piece of legislation, is that if there were some sort of natural disaster, hurricane, tornado, whatever, that they would be able to have any equipment at their disposal to fix that. And
That's in the
that's
law.
the largest thing that we hear.
That's a given, yes.
That's
Yeah,
that's specific.
Under an executive order that the rules would be suspended for any emergencies.
I think it says that in the law too.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
It does.
So yes, that's understood. And obviously if there's a home demolition, there's certain times where you could get an exception to this rule to deal with a particular situation, where they can waive enforcement of it. After a fire or whatever it might be, where you have to clean up a property.
Yeah, I think common sense would always prevail when we have situations like that where we have a lot to deal with, that we would obviously suspend those regulations to help out.
If Camden's done speaking, can I weigh in on this, since I might have some knowledge?
It's Andy.
Hi, Camden. There's a couple things that I want to bring up, and it troubles me again that once again, there are no landscapers here present today, and this is a work session for something that will affect their industry. It speaks volumes to me that not one single landscaper would show up today and speak in favor of this. I mean, you have to take that into consideration. This is a big, huge, unfunded mandate on small businesses. And to give you an example of how big of an unfunded mandate is, I'm not pulling this number out of nowhere land. This is what the town of Southampton spent to outfit one crew with electric blowers. And that number is $4,500. Now, to big companies, maybe that doesn't seem like a lot, but to small businesses, especially in the landscaping industry, where we are talking about small minority-owned businesses. And I'm glad that Mr. Von Leesen brought up the fact of these people, a lot of people in this industry are struggling with health insurance and other issues. $4,500 could cover some of these families' health insurance for the year. So now they need to decide, do they want to comply with this law and buy equipment that they can only use for 3 months of the year, or face fines and face licensing problems, or do they get health insurance for their family? This is a really, it's not a make-believe scenario. This is real. This is braces for your kids or electric blowers from Memorial Day to Labor Day. The equipment is not there. Just like with electric cars, the battery storage isn't there. The charging applications aren't there. The range is not there. Nobody's mandating that everybody go buy an electric car because it's not there. The cost is prohibitive. It's the same way with gas versus electric leaf blowers. And one of the big reasons why I got into, joining the school board was to fight unfunded mandates from our state and from our federal government. This is an unfunded mandate. And to make up things like, 4 ounces of gas is spilled every time a leaf blower is filled, it's not true. And I'm telling you right now, the last time this was brought up at a work session was 2 years ago. And the Sustainability Committee was asked to sit down with local landscapers and have them on board with this, and have them present, and have them say, yes, we're in for this. We can do this. This is a good thing. They're not here. And when this law comes up, another thing that has to be taken into consideration is there is a financial impact on the town of Southampton for this law. Unless we decide to say that, municipalities are exempt and we exempt ourselves, we need more of those setups for parks, absolutely. And our highway department does not own a single electric blower. Why? Because it doesn't make sense for them to purchase them when gas blowers can be used year-round and do everything they need to do. I have an issue when you make a statement that gas-powered blowers blow around particulate and it's unhealthy for the operator, and then you state that electric blowers have the same power, but they're safe. It doesn't make sense. In some of the studies that are being utilized here are from 2001 and 2011. Well, 2012, phase 3 regulations on small powered blowers and small engines came into effect. Since that study in 2001, there's been a 90% reduction in emissions in small uses. And this doesn't stop here. This comes down to, we start Memorial Day to Labor Day, and then it's year round, and then it's no small engines. And then, it doesn't stop. And you can see it in Southampton Village. And another issue I have is, I will not vote for a law that's not enforceable. And in Southampton Village, they are averaging 70 calls a year to their village police department, and they're issuing 7 tickets a year. Why? Because when the police officers go to follow up on the complaint, either the person has left, they're not there anymore, or they're using an electric blower. People aren't going out in their yards to check to see what type of equipment's being used. They're just calling the police. So I'm not putting that burden on our code enforcement. Whereas I think if we went to, right now we have, they're able to be used 7 days a week. I think it's from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Whereas if we put logical day and time restrictions in place so that you don't have as many quality of life issues, so that you can sit outside at night and enjoy your dinner. It also limits the use, and it does it in a way that I think most landscapers would comply with voluntarily. It wouldn't be the burden on code enforcement. It wouldn't be the burden on financially on these companies. And I'm sorry, but when you start regulating what type of equipment one industry can use, it spirals. And next thing you know, you have people asking for you to ban, nail guns on construction sites. So I'm not in favor of this. I do believe that this is where it's headed. And I do believe that once the equipment is there and it's ready to be used year round, I honestly believe that this is where landscapers are going to go eventually. But I cannot tell a small minority owned business that they have to shell out $4,500 for equipment that they can't even use year round. It's criminal. And you're having these people either they break the law or they don't. What I would like to do is I would like to focus on enforcement of our licensing. And I'm working on that, and I want to get it done. And I want us to focus on making sure these companies are licensed, because the companies that are out using these blowers at 8 o'clock at night and on Saturdays and Sundays, 9 times out of 10, they're not licensed. So we need to level the playing field there first. And we can't do this to our small businesses. I'm sorry. And you're talking about 60-day notice. Now, contracts have gone out. People have had their pricing in for the year. And you're talking about a huge expense in 60 days. That's.
Cindy, you had mentioned that you thought there could be logical daytime restrictions. What did you have something in mind that you thought were?
I have no issue with anything in this legislation except for the seasonal ban. I think the hours make sense. I think no Sundays and federal holidays make sense, because that's not when licensed companies are working. And that right there reduces the use.
So what would you be proposing during those seasonal times other than a ban?
The hourly and daytime 8-day restrictions, no Sundays, no holidays.
Oh, the same, what is it?
Same times.
8
and that is what, and then you can look at it, because we're talking about who has the ban in place, who doesn't have a ban in place. The village of West Hampton, the village of Quogue, the village of Sag Harbor, Riverhead Town, Southold Town, they have all looked at it, and they have all stated that the equipment is not there, and they will not put it in place until it can be used year round.
And Dieter?
Cindy, good morning. Glad to finally meet you as a new member. I haven't seen you before, other than on the Zoom here. First of all, let me tell you, I've been testifying on this matter with all the other towns who have this law in place, which we are suggesting and recommending right now. So I've been talking to landscapers all the time, and as a committee, we have been talking to them. So just to correct you, we did talk to them.
But they're not here.
Pardon?
There's not one here saying that they support this.
No, this is not a public hearing.
It's a work session.
It's a work session. It's not a public hearing.
There's also not one here saying they oppose it though either.
No, and on all these meetings, of course, there were pros and cons for this kind of law which we're proposing, but nobody is forced to invest anything. For during the time when the leaves are there, that's when the leaf blowers are really needed. There's no restrictions. So therefore, your argument of spending $4,500 for the poor small little landscapers, which I fully agree is a lot of money, doesn't apply. for these people don't have to spend any money for during the summer period, the Labor to Memorial Day. There's no gas leaf blowers to be used, but they can use the gas leaf blowers for the rest of the time, so they don't have to invest in new equipment.
Mr. Von Leesen, then how do they remove grass clippings from a pea gravel driveway?
Well, there's a good old rake which they can use.
You can't rake grass out of pea gravel.
Yeah, look,
I'm just telling you, I've done it. And you're talking to somebody who's done this for a living.
Right. I know we have. So these leaf blowers, if they're not there, that's it. Bingo. And the other thing is enforcement is always a problem. But if you don't have a law on the books, you don't have anything to enforce. So you have to have the law first and then see to catch up with enforcement, which has always been a problem on all issues which we have in the town or in the village. And now that all the landscapers are used to these laws in our direct neighborhood, there's no reason why Southampton town doing exactly the same, what is already there, and all the landscapers are used to it, why we should stay outside that. I don't think there's any reason whatsoever. And the quality of life is really something important besides the overwhelming knowledge of what it does to the CO2 and all the environmental things where we try to get a clean energy going. And the landscapers had years and years of time to do something about it. It's not something we're doing from one day to the next, Cynthia. We have been talking to them for years. I've been in this for 4 years now, and therefore,
still
and
isn't
the landscapers had now 4 years to work on that to get better equipment. We haven't done it. Please, well, there's no law. We don't have to do it.
Mr. Von Leesen, respectfully, they haven't done it because it's not there. There is no equipment that can be used year-round right now that's electric.
Yes, there is the little electric blowers which the city is using, which the town is using. So the equipment is there, and I can give you a long list in case you don't have it. But I'm sure you do. There's a long list of the equipment. Otherwise, I wouldn't say that. So it's really, I'm not picking any fight with anyone. I just want to get us on the same page as our neighborhoods. I want us to do the same thing, and the landscapers are used to it. They're working on it all along. Why is this one territory of Southampton town has to be excluded from what all the neighbors are doing? And they're getting, as you said yourself, the writing is on the wall. It's getting more and more and more. And even to the extreme of Washington, D.C., he's just banned the equipment all year round and has prohibited the sale of gas leaf equipment in the state of Washington, in Washington, D.C. So they've gone to the extreme. So the writing has been on the wall for years and years. And that landscapers say, oh, now you put the onus on us right now. Well, they could have adjusted, starting small, first investments, slowly, step by step. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. I think we ought to pass this now.
Well, thank you, Dieter. We reserve these kinds of discussions or debates typically for town board meetings and public hearings. So I appreciate everybody's point of view. We just wanted to present the law as it is currently envisioned. As I said, I'll just reinforce the fact that to just confirm what Dieter is saying, that these are laws that are pretty familiar to the community in general. That there is state law pending that we're going to end up dealing with at some point. There's a lot of good discussion here. We want to make the law right. We want to hear from everybody. That's why we'll have a public hearing on February 10th.
Just a point of clarification, because this was done for discussion purposes, we'll actually be submitting it to set the public hearing on February 8th and for a public hearing on February 22nd.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you
That's
for the
okay,
clarification, Christine.
Tommy John?
Supervisor, thank you. If I could, Christine, could I ask you to go over one particular section of the proposed law? This is
Sure.
section 4 under the amendments. section 235-4 under the exemptions, section A, subsection 1.
Yep.
Would you, for the public's edification and my own, so we fully understand what that section says, the added underlined section?
The one that's exclusive of the use or operation of gas power?
Yeah, how does that specifically affect homeowners who own gas-powered leaf blowers?
So the intermittent or occasional use between 7 and 7 of homeowners light residential outdoor equipment, exclusive of the use and operation of gas-powered leaf blowers, regulated separately herein pursuant to subsection. So instead of the 7 to 7, with respect to the leaf blowers, they would then fall under the provisions of the 8 to 6, Monday through Friday, the 8 to 5 on Saturdays, not permitted on Sundays, and within the decibels at the other times.
And this would be between October 20th and May 19th, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is there an exception for homeowners who own gas-powered leaf blowers and would like to use them in season?
No, there's not a carved out exception for that.
Okay. All right. I certainly do support this legislation. I'd like to see some kind of carve out for homeowners who do own gas-powered leaf blowers and would like to use them in June if they see fit to do so. So I think that this is certainly legislation that, like Dieter said, I do agree that we are, in my opinion, late coming to this, and that we should, frankly, have had it in place 2 years ago. But you know, with a homeowner's exemption, I believe that we should exempt homeowners from this, at least for the time being.
Tommy John, can you speak a little more to that? Why you feel that a homeowner should be not subject to the noise restriction?
Well, because they've made investments, and if they have gas-powered leaf blowers and they want to, you know, they want to work on their lawn on Labor Day, or, you know, around Labor Day, or not on the holiday, but around Labor Day or in the summertime, I believe that they should be able to do so, that, you know, that they shouldn't have to necessarily go buy new equipment in the summertime. But I mean, that's, you know, it's for homeowners who currently have electric blowers that they've invested in.
Yeah, I mean, I could see the logic that some homeowners, you know, people who might not be able to afford a landscaper, maybe the only day they have off is Sunday, right? And now you've restricted these things on Sunday. I mean, I could see the off seasons, you know, in the fall, you know, where you have major leaves on the ground, and I could see a homeowner exemption for a Sunday. I'm not sure I would agree, though, that on the seasonal restriction, that the homeowner should be exempt from that as well. It just creates a difficult, I think, situation for code enforcement, trying to figure out whether it's a contractor or a homeowner. Homeowners then become the only ones who can use gas powered leaf blowers in August. I don't know. I have to think about that.
Right. And please do. You know, I see this similar as homeowners who do work on their house. There's a lot of latitude given to homeowners who are, you know, doing work, you know, putting in their own sweat equity on their property. You know, they are allowed to do work on their property on off hours because that's the time that they have. So I support it. I'd like to see an exemption for homeowners.
And Tommy John, just to be clear, we kind of worded it this way because we legislate based on equipment, as opposed to, I know in North Haven Village, for instance, they had, I think, a private versus commercial. They legislated based on that, as opposed to legislating based on the equipment itself, regardless of who was using it. But I understand your point.
Okay.
John, I understand that what you've written is consistent with what you believe the state law will be, and with what most other towns have done. So, you know, my two questions, one is sort of what is the status of the state? I see other states that are poised to put in restrictions on sales of gas leaf blowers. Some of them are doing phase-ins. My other question, really to address Councilwoman McNamara's concern, in the summertime where you have the full restriction, is it possible to do a phase out where, let's say, the first season, from 10 to 2, you could use these pieces, but by the second summer, they're out completely in the season. Is that something you're open to, or would that make it too inconsistent with other laws?
I'd have to really look at that, Supervisor. The idea of this was that we would fully expect this law to evolve over time. During the phase to all electric equipment, ultimately that would be the goal. I think that's where most municipalities are going to. The state law right now is in committee. And I think one of the reasons it's in committee is because those kinds of things are being discussed. Originally 2 years ago when this was presented, or was it 4 years ago, Dieter? I think we did it 2 years ago, just before the pandemic. 2 or 4 years ago when we did this, was to expect to phase in the law in that respect. And I would fully expect this law to evolve, as you learn. As Dieter said, if without a law, you have nothing to talk about and nothing to deal with. So we wanted to get that going. But I'm certainly open to looking at it, but it could cause some issues as far as enforceability again, where it's confusing to both commercial and private residents as to what's expected of them. But I'll certainly sit down with Christine and with Dieter, and we can get back to you.
Cindy, sort of on the same school of thought with the phase out, you were suggesting the 8-hour restriction in the summer, or the 8-hour window where you could use these gas powered. Could you live with, let's say, a 4-hour window in the first summer, and then it's gone by the second summer?
It's used for maintenance accounts. Really, the whole thing about this is that from an environmental standpoint, even this ban period, it's a summer ban. This is the time of year when these blowers are used the least amount of time. We're talking, and I actually looked at our own usage. You're talking about, weekly, a blower being used for say 51 hours during the week in the summer. And you're talking about at the time when the ban isn't in place, like 480 hours a week, because that's primarily being used for cleanups. So the usage part of it, to me, it's the fact that we're restricting them in the time of year when they're used the least amount of time from an environmental standpoint doesn't make sense to me, when we can do a year-round day and time restriction, which will in effect ban it for more time than a seasonal ban. And this way,
wouldn't that be worse, Cindy, for the landscapers if in the fall you had stricter restrictions?
you have those restrictions right now. That's what's being proposed.
No, what's
They're
being
saying-
proposed after September 20th is you can use gas-powered leaf blowers as long as it's on a weekday between 8 and 6, and on a Saturday 9 to 5, and you can't use them on Sundays.
No Sundays, no holidays. And I'm suggesting that be what we limit usage to year round instead of doing a ban. We just do time and day restrictions year round, which I believe will be voluntarily followed. We work on licensing, we level the playing field, we do education pieces, we start having demo days again. And once the equipment is there and it can be phased in and used year round, that's when you go to a full, you have to use electric. It's not there. So my whole problem is that outlay of money for equipment that's being used in place of equipment that these companies already have, just for Memorial Day to Labor Day.
I'm not fully following your thinking. So right now what's being proposed in the summertime, and it is a quality of life issue, it's when our population is much larger in that period.
Yep.
right? More people are in their homes. A lot of them are on vacation, whatever.
Mhm.
Under this law, starting from the time it gets enacted, that summer period, no use of gas-powered leaf blowers.
Correct.
You're saying that in that summer period, you don't use them that much anyway. So,
We don't, we use them for maintenance on our maintenance account, and that's,
and what I'm suggesting as a possible compromise is that in the first year, during that summer period, that 8-hour window that's in the off season shrinks to a 4-hour window rather than a 0-hour window. And I think you're dismissing that completely. And
I am, Jay, because from a standpoint of, these are maintenance contracts. These are probably primarily Wednesday and Thursday every week. And so to limit it from an 8-hour route, you're now only doing a 4-hour route. So you now have to do 4 days of cutting and maintenance because you have to fit your maintenance into those 4-hour windows.
well, what you're looking at is 0 hours. So I just a thought of a compromise, but anyway, don't worry about it. All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, just a quick question for Christine. Christine, what would the penalties be? And in an instance where there is an unlicensed landscaper and there's 4 guys on the property, who gets the ticket? Would it be the person with the blower? Would it be the foreman, the suspected owner of the business? How would that work?
I would suspect that it would be the person with the blower, and the penalties are for the noise section as they are. So I would have to, it's not in this local law because we're not changing them. So I'll go look at them, but it runs the same as any of our noise violations. It's no different.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious of the amount because, sometimes it just becomes a cost of doing business.
I'll look that up and I'll email you.
So
Okay.
Share it with the board.
is that, Christine, the penalty goes to the worker, not to the company?
The company, you can do both. You can do the company and or the worker, how they would normally do it. Yeah.
Just seems unfair to give it to the worker.
More than likely you would give it to the company, but you could give it to the operator.
Okay.
That was my point. If they're licensed, you give it to the owner. If you don't have a license, you have to give it to somebody. So it would probably be the operator.
And
Okay.
wouldn't you also give another ticket for being an unlicensed operator?
I would hope.
Christine, what did you say was the cost of that ticket?
I don't know the cost. I have to look at it because we didn't change that. So it's not part of this law. It's in that section of the code. So I can go and do that and I will email that to the board. I don't have it in front of me.
I think it makes sense to put that into the law itself. What?
It is in the law already. The reason that it's not in this portion is because we are only amending those sections of that much bigger law. So these are just the sections that you see in front of you.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Just
Yeah,
a
we have pretty strong noise level violation. I don't know personally what the fines are on that, but it's just kind of interesting that we find that well, we're running late. It's maybe not time for the debate. We can wait for public hearing. But we are working on tightening up the licensing. I'm actually working with Councilwoman McNamara on that, so that code enforcement can identify the actual company or individual that's using or in violation, so that it makes that a lot easier. And that would also be part of the incentive thing. One of the incentives that we could do locally. We're limited locally to do that. That's why I'm working with the governor's office to be able to provide incentives for the transition that we're talking about to make it easier to take that burden off of people. And there's a very, very strong interest in doing that from the governor's office. A call that I had this morning. So there's more to talk about on that subject.
John, incentives in terms of rebates or what?
Well, there's 2 forms of incentives. One is on your federal taxes, treating companies that are wanting to make the transition and making a serious effort to do so, that they would be provided tax incentives to do that. That's one suggestion. The other are rebates. The other are some forms of financial incentive. That's what's being discussed right now. So there's several avenues to pursue, and basically 2 avenues to pursue it. It's beyond our reach to do that. That would be the federal government from the Treasury, and the other would be whatever state incentives can be offered. As you know, the current governor in the state of New York is very strongly in favor of this and pushing that. It's also part of the state's goals to, for climate issues, sea level rise, those sorts of things, emissions, all those are impacted by this. So
Can I make a simple suggestion, John? And,
Sure.
I also shared, Councilman McNamara's concerns about unfunded mandates. I've had to deal with lots of them in the hotel industry. It seems like there's a new one every year, and some of them are thousands and thousands of dollars to comply with. But one simple thing that might make it a little bit easier is if the state and the county would waive sales tax on gas, on the electric powered leaf blowers. That would take 9% off the cost.
that's actually being talked about as well. That's one of the things on the list, and thanks for bringing that up. I was struggling to find that, so I appreciate you clarifying that. Yes, that's one of the things that is on the list of discussions to do exactly that.
You might want to talk to Legislator Fleming to maybe introduce legislation at the county level to exempt them.
Well, what we expect, what I expect to happen is that the state will pass its law, and that should be part of its law once it's passed. And so I'm trying to work that through the state law right now, because if that state law passes, that makes everything that we're talking about moot. But not knowing when it's going to happen,
The
keep pushing up
batteries, batteries could be half the cost of a, you need more than one battery, so because they don't last that long. So if they could also exempt the batteries from sales tax, that would help too. But
Well, that would be part of a system, an electrical system, and that is certainly one of the main portions of that.
Ryan, I saw you come on. I think you wanted to say something on the code enforcement piece.
I'd like to chime in on this before we go over to Ryan on this, particularly on the state level. At least in the Senate bill, the restrictions are from May 1st to September 30th. So they actually are more restrictive than what's being proposed here. There's no incentive in this particular bill. There may be a companion bill floating around somewhere. It was referred to health last year and it didn't get out of the health committee of the Senate. But this year it's in that committee, and certainly if it has the governor's support, it's going to, it'll have more energy under it. But I think it's important for the industry to know that this is the direction that the community would like to go, either statewide, townwide, and like Councilman Bouvier said, well, if the state law is passed, then all of this is, it'll be a state law.
I want to make the point that they understand that that's where it's going. That's the direction they want to go in. They just want to have equipment that they can replace and have a 1-for-1 and not have to have two separate pieces of equipment on their truck to do the same job, especially at the cost involved. That's
Right.
all.
Thank you. I heard you, and you made that point abundantly clear. I've seen the equipment. I've seen people using the back, the battery packed ones with the battery on their back, and the equipment is going to get there. I'm not going to debate the equipment, but I just wanted to add that particular portion about the state bill.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, and your point's very well taken, Councilman, because with the interest that the governor's office has on that is to maybe to amend that. So that's part of what's being discussed now.
All right. I thought Ryan wanted to say something on the code enforcement piece of it. So I could be wrong, but Ryan, did you?
No, I was the supervisor. I was just gonna. The question had come up before about value of penalties, and I was just gonna answer that question. It ranges between 1,000 and 10,000, depending on the number of offenses, and those are maximum values. So it sounds like a very high amount. The court has the discretion to impose a fine anywhere between 0 and 1,000 on that first offense, and then as it continues over the course of 18 months, on a second offense, it can go up to the 2,500 value. Third offense, it could go up to 10,000. I would imagine it would have to be a fairly egregious action that would drive the higher end on those offenses. But that's the way the fine structure on the noise code violations is currently set up right now.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. All right.
Thanks, Ryan.
Okay, so let's put this to bed for now. John, you have a hearing. We've already noticed a hearing, correct?
We have
Yeah.
not yet.
Or we
I
have
thought
not?
in the draft, no,
No, this
so,
was a draft. We want to do work session first to get your
All
feedback
right.
before we did that.
So you're gonna have to fix the date on the draft because
Right.
it's noticed there's a hearing. So,
yeah,
John, I'm just gonna ask you as sort of a, with the understanding that this does affect a lot of livelihoods, but also that you are looking to get this in place prior to this summer, and we want to give the industry some notice on it if it is going to be passed. But I think this is one of those things that should have two public hearings, and one should be at night. So if we can make sure that we have at least two hearings and one of them at night before, if we're serious about passing this, that we're not criticized for not allowing the industry to weigh in here.
no, absolutely. We did have a number of years ago, I keep getting the 2 and 4 years confused because it just is all melted together. But we did have a long discussion. In fact, if you recall, Supervisor, you had asked for a survey on this, and we did conduct that survey. I wanted to conduct another one because it's been so long. But that survey was roughly 3/4 to a quarter, 3/4 in favor. I think it was around 1,000 respondents. I can't find it, so I'd like to conduct another one. But yeah, absolutely. In the interest of full disclosure and democratic process, we'll have two public hearings, one at night and one in the daytime.
Yeah, and I would very much like to hear from the industry, and Cindy, if you have people in the
Have a list.
But and John, I mean, it definitely matters that most of the community is supporting it, but I do think we have to look at those companies and how they're affected before we make a decision. I remember when I did a survey to increase the speed limit on County Road 39, overwhelming support, but there was a few people whose driveways were on County Road 39, and their concerns were so compelling that it really didn't matter that most people agreed that the speed limit should be higher. They were risking their lives pulling out of their driveways. So I think,
Look, I don't want to. Don't misunderstand. I don't have any skin in this game. I just am responding to an overwhelming reaction by local population who are just sick and tired of the noise, sick and tired of it. This is one of the reasons it's a quality of life issue that they're driving. I'm certainly willing to have two public hearings, but I don't want to be mischaracterized. We have met with a lot of people in the landscaping industry, a lot, and the sustainability committee has met a lot. We have talked to a lot of people, and it's our perception that the larger majority of those companies understand that and understand what's coming forward and are willing to do that, and in fact are doing that now and working hard to reach that goal. So handfuls of people who want to make their opinions known, that's fine. But I also like the idea of a survey because I don't like the appearance of disproportionality and representation. But that's what public hearings are for, as you
exactly.
well.
And I think you're right, John. I actually think most landscapers already own this type of equipment now because of all the different areas that require it, and just also customer satisfaction. I was on a Zoom meeting from home in the fall last year, and my landscaper was using gas-powered leaf blowers. I had to mute the Zoom call because it was so loud. But that would have been a period that it would have been allowed even under your legislation. But I think, even in the fall, I think just for the consumer, if you're out in your backyard while your landscaper, if you have a landscaper is operating and you're trying to, have a meal at the picnic table or whatever, it's nicer if they're using the quieter equipment. So I think that a lot of these companies already have purchased the quieter equipment, just, to not be as much of a
And
problem.
also to put it in context, and I think Dieter said it well, that, we Southampton as a municipality, we're kind of an oasis surrounded by people that have already put laws like this in place. And I would expect that, the law, as I said before, laws evolve as we learn and as we experience, and that's what I would expect. So this law to me is, and it's not a ban. I don't use the word ban. It's a time use restriction. We're not banning anything outright. We're trying to find an equitable way, compromises where everyone's not completely happy, but you get a solution. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve here.
And I think that's in essence why we've also waited this long, is because we've wanted the technology to improve. We wanted the landscapers to be prepared. We're not ahead of the curve on this one, but we've tried to be sensitive to the landscaping industry out here, recognizing how many people make their living as landscapers. So,
Supervisor, can I just ask one thing, it's about the public hearing portion?
sure.
Can we do both in March? I only ask that because I know February 22nd, we already have a public hearing scheduled for the scoping session for QUIOG. And I think it's going to be a big meeting in itself. I'm just putting it out there.
That would be up to the sponsor, I suppose.
Yeah,
We want to get at least one night meeting, right? So right now, the February meeting isn't a night. Oh, we just made it a night meeting. We did make it a night
as
meeting.
a QUIOG.
The thing is, if this is going to pass and we're passing it, if we do 2 hearings in March, doesn't give people a lot of time to get ready for that, what is it, May 20th cutoff?
It's fine with me. It's going to be a long, 2 big public hearings. So,
John, what do you think? You're the sponsor here.
I sooner the better, frankly. I'd like to move this along. We've been delaying and delaying, for various reasons and for whatever reason. But, you guys all know you're getting the same emails I am. You're hearing the same complaints I am. I'd like to get this up for a vote and then move on. So we have a lot of things to do. So, I'm more than happy to sit through a longer meeting if that's necessary, but I think sooner the better, to your point, Supervisor.
So that February evening meeting would be via Zoom. I'm gonna hope that the day meeting in March, the second hearing, will be in person. I'm hopeful. It depends on COVID, obviously, and the elevator at Town Hall. But so at least we'd have one in-person meeting. Maybe we'll do a hybrid meeting at that point too. So that would help. So John, your preference is to go ahead with the late February public hearing at night and the daytime March hearing, second week of March.
That's correct.
Okay, and then this could be potentially adopted by mid-March.
Correct.
Okay. Then it gets filed, so it takes a couple weeks there. But it would give adequate notice in your mind then.
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. Let's move on then. We'll end this conversation for now. Thank you for doing this work session. Thank you to the participants, to Dieter
Thank you very much.
and Camden.
You, Dieter.
Thank you.
Camden, I think he left already.
He left already.
I can still thank them.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
So our next item on the agenda has to do with the Bridgehampton and the Sagapanic ECDs, the erosion control districts. And the town, before I was supervisor or any of you were on the town board, prior administration established a tax district, actually more than one ECD, one in Bridgehampton, one in Sagapanic, and put together a major project, a very significant project. I want to say a $26 million project where the district sort of taxed itself around 25 million. And the town contributed because of its properties as well. We have a number of beach properties. So this really came out of this issue of what do we do about erosion? We don't want to build hard structures like bulkheads or revetments. How do we keep people's properties from washing away and allow them to enjoy their properties? How do we protect the public access so that we have beaches for everybody to enjoy? And we set up this erosion control district so that people could, oceanfront properties only, basically, would tax themselves to rebuild the beach. And that project, as I'm sure you'll hear some today, was extremely successful. Extremely, so that it was envisioned as a 10-year project. And we are we're in the last 2 years of that project. It hasn't all washed away yet. Some of it has, but it's probably, we'll hear from Aram and others that it's probably about 50% still there in certain areas, maybe less in others and more in others. And now they're looking to repeat it at some level of, similar project. So, people now have been paying it in their tax bills, but if it was only envisioned for 10 years. And if they don't do a second phase, then we're going to be right back where we started from. So I'm going to turn it over, I guess, to Kathleen, if Kathleen's going to introduce it, but we also have Marty Shea on the call. We have Aram Chachunian, who is a coastal, First Coastal Corporation, who's a consultant on this project. And are we bringing in anyone else? Tim Canna?
Yes, Dr. Tim Canna is here from Coastal Science Engineering.
Okay, perfect.
Kathleen, I can't turn on my video.
Jay, I'll talk about the financing if you want to.
Okay, Len is here, and then are we getting Alan Stillman and Jeff Lignelli in? Charles, can you bring them in as well? These are some of the property owners in the ECD.
I don't see Jeff.
All right, raise your hand if you're one of those people I named and maybe calling in or something like that. We might not be able to identify you, so just try to raise your hand. All right. All right, so why don't we get started? Kathleen, you want to set this up?
Well, thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Good morning, members of the town board. So as the supervisor indicated, we're here to talk to you about renewing the Bridgehampton and Sagapanic Beach Erosion Control District. I'm just going to call it ECDs for short, renourishment projects. By way of background, I'll just offer a little bit of an overview. As you probably know, New York State town law authorizes the town board to create certain special improvement districts or special taxing districts to address particular projects within its jurisdiction. The legislature has identified those special improvement districts that may be formed, and a beach erosion control district is one such district. And specifically, town law authorizes a town board to create a beach erosion control district so that it may arrest erosion and prevent or alleviate damage from such erosion within the boundaries of that district. So with this purpose in mind, in 2013, the town board created the Bridgehampton and Sagapanic Beach Erosion Control Districts, which were devoted to placing approximately 2 million cubic yards of sand. It was 1 million per district, along roughly 6 miles of contiguous ECD shoreline. Generally speaking, the boundary of your Bridgehampton ECD includes those oceanfront homes from the western boundary of Flying Point Road to its eastern boundary of Sag Main Beach. And I will try to share my screen because there is a GIS layer that shows these ECDs. You can certainly look at that. Can you see my screen? Okay, are you able to see that?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so there's Flying Point Road, and then you can see this is the layer. So if you ever want to go on here and take a look at it, Bridgehampton extends to the village of Sagapanic. This is Sag Main. And then this is the Sagapanic ECD's western boundary is also here, Sag Main Beach, and extends to its eastern boundary of Town Line Road. I'll just drag a little bit over, and there's Town Line Road. There are approximately 79 taxable parcels in the Bridgehampton ECD and approximately 53 taxable parcels in the Sagapanic ECD. As authorized in 2013, the total cost of that renourishment project for the Bridgehampton ECD was about $13,143,000. Of that cost, roughly $12,500,000 was bonded through the town for the capital construction project. And then $600,000 was raised through the levying of taxes for monitoring and surveying costs over the next 10 years. Similarly, the total cost of the renourishment project for the Sagapanic ECD was about $13,364,000. And of that cost, roughly $12,765,000 was bonded, with $600,000 set aside for monitoring and surveying costs. And I know Dr. Khanna and Aaron will talk to you a little bit more in their presentation, but just so you understand, those surveying costs are necessary so that the town can maintain current and accurate data in the event that we do seek to apply for FEMA reimbursement in the event of a named storm. But those monitoring costs cannot be bonded pursuant to the law, so those are taken out of the bond. So your bond itself was roughly $25 million. The life of the 2013 project and the attendant bond was 10 years. And so we are approaching that 10-year mark in 2023. As it relates to the levying of taxes and the raising of funds, each district chose to tax themselves with a different methodology. The Bridgehampton residents chose to tax themselves on a benefit basis, with the benefit measured by the linear waterfront footage of each parcel within the district. The Sagapanic residents chose to tax themselves also on a benefit basis, but measured a little differently, measured by a combination of their assessed value as well as the linear waterfront footage for each parcel. Pursuant to Town Law 2024 and 5, that methodology cannot be changed. So that is, if we choose to go forward, that will remain how they are taxed. So given those details, I'll turn it over to Aram Chicherny of First Coastal and Dr. Tim Khanna of Coastal Science Engineering, so they can talk to you a little bit about the proposal moving forward. And they do have a PowerPoint. And then after that discussion, if you're so inclined, I can come back and talk to you about the procedure moving forward and what the next steps would look like from the town board level. Aram, we can't hear you.
Excuse me, Kathleen, can you put my video on?
Yes. Charles, can you try and get Dr. Khanna's video on?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. And in case the board is not aware, I'll just note that Dr. Khanna and Aram Chicherny were obviously the coastal engineers that designed this project for the town 10 years ago as part of that $25 million, really $26 million beach renourishment project. So I don't want to get too far, but I do believe that they would ask to be your consultants if you choose to move forward on the next project as well.
Okay. Do we have?
Tim's gonna call in.
Was that? Tim's gonna call in?
Aaron is gonna call in. He can't get his audio.
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Dr. Khanna.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Do we have the PowerPoint to share? Let's do that.
Do we not have audio from Aaron? I guess not. All right.
He's gonna call in.
Okay.
Can everyone see that PowerPoint, please?
Yes.
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 Okay, great. Well, we have a short series of slides here to just describe how we're doing with the project. And first, I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you board members this morning. we're really proud of this project because it's one of our best performing projects of all time. And we've done about 55 of these nourishment projects, very large projects from all up and down the East Coast. So I'm particularly pleased with this one, the way it's performed. That's the good news. But we've been in place now for almost 8 years, and we're actually seeing some severe erosion in the past year. So what I want to show you just quickly is how the project fared in the last year, particularly. Tell you how much sand is remaining after this project. And then we'll discuss something about the scale and scope of the proposed project for renourishment. Renourishment is a common procedure for these projects because you have to maintain the projects because it's the type of project that is not going to be permanent. Putting sand on the beach, the sand is going to move as nature chooses to move. So we have to play around these coastal processes that move and mold the beach and so on. So I'll just discuss that real quickly before turning it over to Aaron. And then finally, we'll talk about some of the funding options that we considered. The project consists of about 5.7 miles of linear ocean front there. You can see the distances to Shinnecock Inlet and to Georgia Pond. And we divide the project into 4 reaches. So there are 2 in Sagapanic. Reach 1 starts at Town Line Road and extends down to Sag Pond Inlet. And then reach 3 picks up the Bridgehampton portion of the project and extends all the way down to Flying Point Road to the public beach down there. And that's actually Watermill area. In September 21, when we were out there, we took a look at the beach conditions. And, you know, to the casual observer, you might think that the beach is actually in pretty good shape. There was a fairly wide dry sand beach and so on. But what we look for are certain characteristics of the beach on the visible beach. And we see waviness of the shoreline. Some sections may be only 50 feet wide from the toe of the dune and other sections over 200 feet wide. And this is the range of changes that we often see along your beach, 150-foot difference in width as you go along the beach. So in September, the beach was relatively healthy. That is what you could see of it. But we also noticed that there was a very steep beach face that had been pushed up during the summertime. The photograph in the upper left-hand corner there shows an escarpment, a low scarp at the base of the beach. And that's a sign that we're now going into the fall erosion period, going into winter. And as we have bigger waves, they'll cut the beach back, causing it to narrow and in some places encroach all the way to the toe of the foredune. So the idea is you want to have enough width of visible beach to accommodate those normal seasonal changes in the profile. Now, very importantly for our surveys, we look at what's happening in the offshore zone, because think of the beach like an iceberg. The portion that you spend most of your time on is the tip of the iceberg, but supporting that beach is all that volume of sand that's underwater. That's very important because without that underwater sand, it's like building a house without a basement or a first floor. You can't support the upper floors without the good foundation. So what we do when we measure the beach, monitor it each year, is we consider the littoral zone a big sandbox. Imagine how much sand is contained between the foredune in front of everybody's house out to some depth offshore. And we extend that depth to a reference underwater contour, which is referred to the Fema reference level. This is a standard that we use for purposes of determining how well the beach is performing, how much sand is gained or lost over time. And it's very important, as Kathleen said, for the for FEMA's purposes, because if we have a major storm, sure, we'll lose some sand on the visible beach. Some of the sand will move offshore, as everybody knows, and then later on it'll come back on. So FEMA takes that into account, and they want to know how much sand has been actually lost out to some great distance offshore, in this case, about a half a mile offshore. And by measuring that, you sort of account for all the sand that's moving in the littoral zone. So those are the important reference areas. We calculate what's in the foredune. We calculate what's on the visible beach, the part that most people are concerned about. And we calculate how much is underwater. And just to cut to the chase real quickly, the upper part, I just want to show you in the past year, between 2020 and 2021, we lost almost 800,000 cubic yards of sand. That's fully a third of how much sand we put on back in 2013. So now I want you to focus on the bottom part of this table. This is a tracking of how much sand was remaining in our sandboxes between each BECD from the first year after nourishment all the way up to this past September. And you'll notice that we were tracking 100%, 124%, 106%. You might say, well, how could that be? How could we have more sand than we actually put on the beach? Well, think about what happened in 2012. We had Hurricane Sandy, and Sandy pushed a lot of sand way offshore into deep water. And whenever we have a major event like the Great Hurricane of 38 or the Northeaster of 1962 or this past 2012 storm of record Sandy, some of that sand that is lost offshore during the storm eventually works its way back up. So the timing of your project in 2013 was excellent. It took advantage of the fact that we were going to get some natural recovery of the beach, plus the additional sand. That allowed the project to perform exceedingly well. In fact, better than expected, because we had this extra sand going into the sandbox that FEMA counts. So we're tracking along here for the first 6 years at well over 100% remaining. That's pretty great. And that's why I say this is an excellently performing project. But if you remember our report in 2020, this is one of our annual reports that we do. We predicted that we're now at a point where we're starting to see some losses. Those losses, we believe, will accelerate. And most of those losses we were seeing were in the underwater portion of the profile. So sure enough, when we came out in 2020 and we measured, you see we dropped below 100% in the Sagapanic BECD, and we dropped also in Bridgehampton. And we said in that report, things are not looking as good going into the future simply because we don't have as much sand underwater. So when we measured in September 21, we found that we had lost a huge amount, those figures up there, 800,000 cubic yards just in the past year. And it's because the underwater zone had lost so much, we lost our reservoir of sand. We lost the base of the iceberg, so to speak. And so that's why renourishment is so important, because it's that time to sort of re-up on the project, to restore the amount of sand that's on the beach, to rebuild that underwater profile so that we can keep maintaining a healthy beach for protection of everybody. And what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Aram so he can talk about the purposes of this proposed project real quickly.
Thanks, Dr. Khanna. And hello to Supervisor and the board, and thanks to Kathleen Murray for all the help that she's provided over many years of this project. One of the things I'd like to point out is that Tim says that the project is performing really well, and then you see a whole bunch of erosion. Your question may be, well, how is it performing well? because I want you to go back to the original design of the project. So after Sandy, when we initiated this project, beach was in an incredibly depleted condition. It had been ignored for decades, and we had calculated that there was, in the two districts, a 1 million cubic yard deficit of beach. Current condition, the then condition of the beach, and a healthy condition. So our project design was divided into two pieces. One was to restore the beach to a healthy condition, and the second was to provide 10 years of erosion accommodation within the factor. So that's precisely what we're seeing playing out here. As we approach the 10-year period, we're seeing that the enhanced nourishment intended to absorb 10 years of erosion is being eroded, but the base beach in a healthy condition still remains. So important that we understand the context of the erosion, that it fits within the line that we originally proposed to the town and that was constructed. So let's talk a little bit about what it means renourishment going forward. This project is, in the eyes of FEMA, is a municipal facility. Therefore, in the event of a presidential disaster, FEMA would pay 75% of the restoration costs, and the state 12.5%, leaving the balance for the EPA. In order to maintain that protection, the project must be an engineered project, and to being engineered and constructed according to the design, it needs to be maintained over time. Obviously our design is threshold. Just as a note, and Dr. Khan has done a number of FEMA restorations, so he's anyone. But what FEMA looks for, reimbursing a town such as Southampton in the event of a presidentially declared emergency, is not the magic 50%, but are you good stewards of the project? In other words, have you been monitoring it on an annual basis so that you have the sediment budget accountability to understand what's happening? Two, are you planning for the future? Have a budget going forward in order to maintain the design that you developed? That's what we're here to talk about today. So if the volume slips to 49% next year, that's not a we'll look at what is it that you're planning to do, budgeted for it, are you moving forward? That's guidance that FEMA gives to all municipalities. The other thing, the other benefit of the renourishment are the things that we see every day, which are more space for people and animals and plants, a larger dune growing because of the wide beach, and property values and the tax base, which are of great importance to town, but the school districts, all of the economy in the area. So renourishing accomplishes all of the goals that we set forward. The other thing is, if you look at these photos, you can see how bad it was right after Sandy. And go to the next slide, Tim, we'll see how great it became. So this the same area of Mecox, and you can see that post-restoration, the beach was wider. And over time, in addition to maintaining a wide beach, the and from the beach is being blown up into the dunes. Themselves are becoming much larger. And in our annual reports, you'll see that the dune growth has been superlative in both of the districts. Just talk a little bit about where all the sand comes from. Have utilized these what are called offshore borrow sites, and these areas are identified by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They've gone through full environmental review, and we have coordinated with the Army Corps of Engineers to get access to different portions of the site for the initial project, and we would do for a follow-on project. It's important to understand that these locations are farther offshore than the sandbox that Dr. Khanna described for you earlier on. And that's critically important to the design because you wouldn't want to impact the source of sand that feeds onto the beach. So these borrow sites are in 5 to 65 feet of water, which is more than double the Fema depth where sand is moving.
Aram, let me just jump in here for a moment. I want to make one important point. One of the things that makes our project so successful is that the match of sand quality with the native beach is excellent in these borrow areas that we found offshore. And it's important for two reasons. One is so that people don't perceive that the nourished beach is any different than the original beach. But secondly, from an economic standpoint, the more data that we collect and give to the dredgers as they're bidding the projects, generally the more favorable the cost of the project will be. Dredgers don't like uncertainty. They want to know what kind of material they're dredging because it affects their production and so on. So they can be the most competitive when they have lots of data. And that's why a lot of our preliminary engineering and permitting work involves in locating the best possible source of sand offshore, avoiding gravel deposits or mud deposits and so on. So I just wanted to make that point because in almost all of our projects, we tend to receive lower bids than many other projects that go out with less rigorous geotechnical data. Go ahead, Aaron.
Thanks, Tim. And a third benefit of this extensive pre-project soil boring is that by matching the grain size that's currently on the beach with the borrow site, the project itself performs better because the sands match together. So that advanced work is really stone to any project and is one of the reasons that this project has worked so well. Let's just take a look at the overall scope. You're at a project volume of between 1.7 and 2 million cubic yards. This obviously would be refined based upon updated hydrographic surveys. The budget is approximately 20. Construction cost is going to be $1 million of that, and your soft costs, as identified, are about $3 million. And your project length here is, as Kathleen said, more or less 5.5 to 6 miles. We're looking at possibly adding area of Georgica, which contains about 4 parcels and about a mile of beach on East Hampton. Be able to work with the town of East Hampton. To do that, we will get a sustainable project, but it is not part of our base project design. And I described the borrow areas earlier, and that we not only use the data collected for the 2013 reimbursement, but we will collect additional data in order to accomplish the goals that Dr. Khanna talked about. So, this is kind of what these projects look like. They're, have an offshore dredge. In this case, was the Dredge Illinois. It's a 30-inch cutter head dredge. They pump 24/7, weather conditions permitting, and they have interesting apparatus to measure the beach. You see the crab, which is a file measuring device that's used, and they pump around the clock. And the last day of pumping was at 2 a.m. on 21 February 2014. The site safety is incredibly important. If you look at the lower photograph, the site is tightly controlled so that people don't get in and out, and there's always a backshore corridor established so that fishermen and dog walkers and anybody else can transit past the site safely. At a couple of different time scales in order to determine what would effective way for the town to proceed forward. So we looked at a 5-year project versus a 10-year project. And this is the analysis which strongly supports a project. At the end of the day, it all comes down to one number. Dredging, there are two numbers. One, the mobilization and demobilization number, and number two, per cubic yard number. Mobilization charge is the cost that the dredging companies charge to bring their equipment to the site. As you can see, it's very large. It's $5 million. That's our estimate based upon past experience and recent bid openings. Therefore, you want to the extent possible, minimize your mobilization. Doing a 5-year project doesn't accomplish that, and you can see that there is just about a $6 million economic advantage to going with a 10-year project because of avoiding that mobilization, plus the environmental advantages of only having. Our last item we would like to go through is the proposed timetable, beginning obviously and proceeding through construction in 20. We've laid out, a basic approach here where conducted over the course of the summer that we're going. Our board authorizes us through the summer to engage with the community. Out that we have maintained close contact with both the Beach Erosion Control District's advisory boards, as well as sending all individual property owners within the district correspondence explaining that the proposed plan is going forward and that we were reaching out to engage with. And starting in August and September, begin the application conference meetings with various regulatory agencies for the necessary documents and get that bid by fall of 22. There will be a robust environmental review process, but we are very confident considering that initial process environmental review was favorable. This project has performed well, and there are significant. The rest of the timeline laid out for 2023 includes study, getting the permits, final designs and plans, and then going out in the summer of 23 bids to award. And so that is what we propose going forward. And
Aram, you've frozen up.
my video is frozen for some reason, but I was hearing everybody else.
All right, try to keep going if you can. Oh, but we can't see the screen anymore. Oh, there it is.
There you go. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Keep going.
All right, so that concludes our presentation, and if you happy, Tim and I are happy to answer any questions we can.
I have a couple questions. So in terms of getting this project started, Kathleen mentioned we had to advance some money. And we do have Len on the phone. This is, I guess, certain initial design and permitting. And then Kathleen, we can then charge that back to the ECD. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Supervisor. What I would add to the timeline that you're looking at under 2022, in the August timeframe, assuming you authorize Dr. Khanna and Aram to move forward, once they have those plans and those specifications in place, they'll have a good cost estimate for us. And that's when I would notice a public hearing, if the board is so inclined, to go out to public hearing under Town Law 202B and get the residents' input as to whether or not this is a project that they're interested in. So we would have to build that public hearing phase into that timeline as well.
Kathleen, the last time we did this, and none of the current town board members were here at the time, the town also, of the, let's say, $26 million project, there was some $1 million contribution from the town. What fund was used for that? And does that fund still have any money remaining?
So you're correct, Mr. Supervisor. There are I believe 4 town-owned parcels in the Bridgehampton ECD. And there were 2 town-owned parcels in Sagapanic ECD. That may be down to 1 now. I believe there was a transfer of a property on Sand Dune Court. So in a measure of, under the law, the town is exempt from contributing to these ECDs under real property tax law. But as a measure of good faith and belief in the project, the town board at the time, and also to really add to the contiguous nature of the project, the town board decided that it was appropriate to contribute to the project in a monetary form. So the town found $1.5 million, which was half of what would have been its pro rata share. And that was funded by park reserve monies that are set aside from subdivision park fees in subdivisions that are created within the vicinity of the area. I don't know what the park reserve fees, what that park reserve fund looks like today, but that was the funding source then. We did get an opinion from the state comptroller at the time that said it was appropriate to use those park monies on a beach because it was a recreational facility. And I do want to note that 1.5 million was only half of our pro rata share. The Sagapanic and Bridgehampton ECD homeowners donated the other half of that share to make up that what was really $3 million of a town portion.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Len is on, but I don't know that fund has anything left in it. And, obviously, yeah, we don't pay property taxes. So,
Yeah, Jay, the last time I looked, we've been using that money for other improvements in that district.
right. So that's something that the town board is going to have to wrestle with if this time you're going to contribute toward this or not. And then I guess the last thing is, where did the sand go? And this maybe is a question for Aram or Tim, but I suspect that Southampton Village is probably, the beaches are probably getting wider over there, because I think the literal drift is primarily westward. So there are areas that are benefiting, which makes me also feel like if we could get Georgica involved in this project, and that additional mile, I think you said, of beach, that would probably benefit this entire project. And then maybe the last thing is, you're at basically 50% levels, and you're looking to put the same amount of sand on that you did initially. So it sounds like your design goal after this is done is actually more than the original project. So if you could just clarify that, or do you anticipate in the 2-year window that it's going to take to get this project up and running, whether you'll have additional losses and you'll end up with basically the same beach as you had after the first go round?
Aram, you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right, Supervisor. These projects tend to move sand down coast. The down coast direction, as you said, is to the west. So that is benefiting the village of Southampton without question. And we'd love to have their participation sometime in the future. But another point I want to make is that projects, the longevity of a project is a function of the square of the length of the project. So just think of it. If you just put sand in front of one house, it's going to spread very quickly to the adjacent areas. But if you put it in front of 100 houses, it's going to last many, many times longer. So the more sand that we can put up coast of Sagapanic in the Georgica Pond area or East Hampton, the better off you all will be. And just on another aside that I want to mention, if we set a budget of $26 million for the total project cost, we don't know exactly how the bids are going to come in with the dredgers. And so we hedge our designs anticipating a swing of 10% over or 10% under in terms of the volume of sand that we can afford based on the final bids. Back in 2013, that project came out a little bit under our budget, so we were able to increase the volume that we actually put on the beach in that project. And I can tell you that just about every single project that CSE has done in the last 30 years, we've only twice had to go over budget, and that was for some extraordinary circumstances. All the other 40 some odd projects, we stuck right to the budget, and we adjusted the quantity of sand placed to match what the bids were when they came in. So I think that's a favorable way to go, and it also protects the town from unforeseen circumstances, cost overruns. We do not plan to have any situation where there will be a cost overrun on this project. And we've done it so many times. We work very closely with the dredgers. We know how they think, they know how we think. And so we feel like we can deliver a project on time and on budget or under budget for whatever the budget is that you give us to work with.
So if, let's say the town weren't willing to put $1.5 million into this project, you would have to shrink the project slightly.
Yes.
All right.
And it would be,
I have a question, maybe a totally left field question, but how does this interact with Fema? Or does it?
I can answer that, Councilman. So FIMP is authorized in the geographic area extending from Fire Island Inlet to Montauk Point. However, east of Shinnecock Inlet, the only area that's approved for construction is downtown Montauk. And the reason for that is that the Army Corps is tied to a benefit cost analysis criteria called the National Economic Development Criteria. So they are only allowed to count coastal storm damage reduction. So damages directly caused by a coastal storm. And when you look at this shorefront, there's not enough damage caused by a coastal storm to justify the Army Corps' participation. Typically, you have, in order for that to occur, you have high density development like downtown Montauk, or you have barrier islands with extensive bayside development like Shinnecock Bay. So in this particular case, it does not meet that Army Corps benefit cost criteria and therefore is not eligible for construction. However, as we know, the economics, the real economics of this area are significantly different, and thus the reason that the property owners are willing to
lose our.
Lost you, Aram.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you get any of that?
Yeah, we got most of it. Yeah.
Just last couple seconds we missed.
Okay. So I was just saying, the real economics are much different than the Army Corps contrived economics, and that's why the property owners are ready to tax themselves to undertake this.
So just to follow up on that, I don't know the sourcing of the sand that FIMP is going to be using. Is that going to impact your sourcing for this project?
Will not impact our sourcing because we are sharing the borrow sites, but the calculations have been done both by us and the Army Corps that there's sufficient material.
Okay, thank you.
So going back to my question before, in terms of scale of the project and budget, what you're proposing now is basically a $26 million project that would, if the town contributed as it did last time, would basically the property owner's taxes would be the same. However, if the town didn't contribute and you didn't reduce the project cost, the taxes would then have to go up to cover that extra $1.5 million. So it's something the board has to wrestle with to what, if any extent, assuming that we're supporting the project in general, to what extent the town would contribute here. Clearly, we have beaches, et cetera. But we also, that fund that was used, I don't believe has any funds in it now. And it's certainly been a goal of mine, and I think the town boards, to keep property taxes as low as possible, and to bond for our properties there would put a cost that would burden not just this area, but the entirety of the town. So there's really no way to do it in a way that, you know, everybody who is a property owner wasn't paying some of that cost. So what was nice about the old fund, it was really targeted toward that Bridgehampton area. So the funds were coming from subdivisions within that area. So that's something we're going to have to wrestle with, but we don't have to answer it right now. Any other questions? Anyone? All right, so Kathleen, what's the next step here?
So if the board is so inclined, the next step would be a resolution for your consideration, hiring both Dr. Khanna and Aram Tuchernian to be your environmental consultants on this project and to begin work on a new set of plans and maps for what would be the next project.
You know, I understand this is very highly specialized, probably not a lot of people who do what Aram and Tim do. We probably don't have to bid it as a professional service, but I'd want to know if we are going automatically to them, that their costs, you know, their per hour costs are similar to last time. Do we have a sense? Maybe Aram, you can speak to that we're not getting taken advantage of because of that situation?
Yes, I can, Mr. Supervisor. We've prepared a preliminary budget that we gave to Kathleen, and I think if you compare the two budgets together, you'll see that the costs are generally in line.
Okay.
I believe the total project costs for our engineering and permitting costs are lower than they were in 2012.
So we're benefiting because you've already done this.
Yes, we have some background information.
Right. Okay.
I haven't made a direct comparison, so please don't hold me to that. That was a long time ago when we wrote that proposal, 2011 or something like that. But you know, basically the cost of dredging has gone up, at least incrementally, with the construction price index. Our fee schedule has gone up incrementally in terms of hourly rates, but the total price has not changed because we can work more efficiently nowadays having some background information. If we had to start this from scratch, for example, the engineering costs would be significantly greater.
Okay, but your hourly costs have gone up basically based on CPI or?
Right, exactly.
Okay. All right, I don't have any other questions. Anybody else have any questions?
No, mine have been answered by the presentation and what Councilman Bouvier had asked about FIMP and some of the sites as well. I do have a question. I guess this would be for Len about these coastal erosion districts and their appearance on our tax rate sheets in the town of Southampton. There is mention of the Tiana Coastal Erosion District in 19 and 20 tax rate sheet, but these do not seem to be on our tax rate sheets, and I think that would be helpful for us and the public to look at those.
I'm not sure why they're not on the tax rate sheets, but we're currently collecting about $2.5 million for debt service to be paid out of those two districts, about 1.2 for each district, Bridgehampton and Sagapanic. What is unique with this timing here, just so you all know, is that if we authorize the borrowing and we borrow and we authorize it in 23, we won't have to make a debt service payment until 24. So in these folks' tax bills now is amount that covers the $2.5 million of annual debt service. So as that's falling off, the new debt will come in. So their tax bills won't change. If the timing is later, what's going to happen is the tax bill is going to go down. Then the following year, you're going to have to raise it. And then you'll wind up having to pierce the cap because these tax numbers are part of our overall tax cap calculation. So there becomes tax implications on the whole town scale that you're going to have to address if the timing doesn't fit in exactly to this proposed timetable. I just wanted to add that little complexity to it. It brings my job into play if this timetable isn't followed.
I understand the current financial conditions nationwide, as well as our AAA bond rating could work out well for these folks here. Also, this was one of the districts that we refinanced about a year and a half ago, right?
Correct. It didn't shorten the duration. It just lowered the payments.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that was good work on Len's part. I mean, it saved, I think, about $500,000 or more, right, Len?
Yeah.
Just taking.
But again, I can't stress enough that the process of budgeting this, you'll want to follow this time frame. I mean, if you want to do it, you really should follow this time frame. Otherwise, a lot of other things get more complicated from a financial standpoint.
Well, it's all timing because we don't. The worst case scenario is you end up with double debt where you have it overflow. You have two bonds being paid, and then you have a big jump in taxes. We don't want that. Nor do we necessarily want it to drop down to zero and then pop back up again, which would then, affect piercing the cap. So it's all timing it correctly. We can and we're sort of on that schedule now that the new bonds would kick in exactly when the old bond is paid off. So.
Correct.
All right. Any other questions? All right, so Kathleen, I guess I'll put if you want to prepare the resolution for me to hire the consultants.
You'll also, Supervisor, you're going to need to create an appropriation to hire them. Also, I don't know how much it is, Kathleen. I know.
And you're going to have to figure out where that's going to come from. That'll ultimately be reimbursable should the project move forward.
Right, I would ask both Aram and Dr. Khanna to just send me their project proposal, and I can share that with the town board. And that will have the overall cost in there with their scope of services. And then we can try and identify a funding source until such time that those monies can be charged back to the district.
Okay. Now, were we able to get onto the call? And you did, Kathleen, you did reference earlier that we would have to do outreach to the property owners, but I thought we reached out to at least a couple of the property owners to participate today. Charles, do you have anybody, can you see anybody on the call? I thought Jeff Lignelli was going to come on, and maybe Alan Stillman, or either of those people there.
Mr. Supervisor, during the course of this meeting, I did get an email from Jeff Lignelli. He said he read through the presentation and he thought it was, he fully supports it.
Okay.
And if I could just add, Mr. Supervisor, there is a public hearing process, of course, under Town Law 202B, but just so this board understands, in 2013, or rather in 2012, when the districts were actually formed, one of the conditions of the formation of the district was that before any town board proceeded with another new project, there would be a resolution in support a condition precedent was a resolution in support from the advisory committee, ECD, authorizing that project to go forward or indicating its support for that project to move forward. We do have 2 advisory committees, one for each ECD. And so before we move forward with anything, we would ask as a condition of the establishment of those districts that we have a resolution from those boards indicating their support. And then I understand, as Aaron has indicated, that there will be some more outreach as the summer season approaches. And then of course, the town board hearing process is your formal process to get to hear those public comments.
Would that advisory opinion be needed before we even hire the consultants, or we can hire the consultants and then before we do the project, we get that advisory?
Before we do the project.
Okay. I see David Lederman came on. Is that part of this?
Yes, David Lederman is on the Sagapanic advisory.
All right, Mr. Lederman, if you want to speak, maybe we can get him.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say that I didn't see Jeff Lignelli here. So our board is 100%. I'm on the Bridgehampton board. We are 100% behind the project as proposed.
Okay, thank you. We're going to wrestle with this issue about, the last time, David, the town contributed financially toward the project. But the fund, if you were listening, that was used is no longer has funds in it to do it. So hopefully this project isn't dependent upon a town component here.
I would think that would be, we would love to have the town contribute, don't get me wrong, but I would think that the $1.5 million would be a deal breaker. Okay, I don't think that that's the case.
It would not, all right, you don't think it would?
My opinion, and I'd have to ask my board, obviously, but I don't see how the $1.5 million would be a deal breaker. And that'd be Dr. Khanna and Tim and Aaron can figure that out.
Okay, and I have to obviously ask my board too. So, but we appreciate that. We really do work hard to try to stabilize taxes throughout the town, and I'm not sure that it's fair to make residents in Flanders and East Quogue and West Hampton, pay a portion of this project. So we'll sort that out. Obviously, we have town beaches there, which people use from all over the place. In fact, the number of beaches, Sag Main Beach is heavily used, and Flying Point Beach and Scott Cameron Beach. Those are terrific beaches. I'm missing one too, Mecox. So, we do maintain facilities in that area, and we do appreciate the restoration of these beaches. I don't want to give the wrong impression, but we also have to wrestle with a lot of other important community needs and make those funding decisions. Okay. All right. Thank you. Anyone else on this?
Yeah, just a question to Kathleen. Do we need to go to the trust, or to what extent do we need to go to the trustees, as this is on their easement for this?
Sure. So I believe they're probably necessary when it comes to the permitting process. And we did have an agreement. I can find that agreement back in 2012 with them in terms of just kind of consenting to and agreeing that, this was something that they were willing to participate in. We can, of course, and we should, of course, reach out to them going forward, should the town board be inclined to move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think there are important voices here as well. They manage the cuts at Sag Pond and Mecox, and how they operate those cuts can affect the movement of sand along the beach. And I think we need some input from the trustees, certainly, on this. All right, anyone else? All right, so we're gonna change gears here.
Thanks very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, board members.
All right, so let's move on to our a little bit behind schedule, not too bad. We're gonna talk about a proposed trail license agreement at Deerfield Road and Deer Run and Watermill. I see we have our planning director, Dave Wilcox here. So Dave, do you want to introduce this?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Supervisor and Town Board and Council. We are waiting for Jackson Dodds to come on, but I can do the presentation and then hopefully he'll be on by the time you might have some questions. Let me share my screen. I'll show you what we're doing. Can you see that screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so this subdivision, basically these properties right here, if you can see my cursor, this was the subdivision map of Deer Run Farm. When the planning board approved this a number of years ago, they also preserved this agricultural reserve with the power lines running right through the middle of that ag reserve. At the same time, the planning board got a trail easement that you can see in purple that ran immediately north of the power line, 25-foot wide trail easement that went from Deerfield Road up to the northeast corner of the ag reserve. This property is still privately owned. It's landlocked. It's never come in for development. And the idea would be to try to, here you can see other protected properties in the area between this road and Deerfield Road. The plan was to get a trail that would connect from Deerfield Road up to this road here. These properties have been put in place to accommodate that trail. If this property ever came in for development, we could negotiate a trail easement, or perhaps CPF could negotiate the purchase of this property. So going back to the existing trail. So as you can see, the trail easement goes right through the middle of the ag reserve. The property owner wants to fence the entire property, this orange line that goes around the perimeter. But the trail easement prohibits blocking off of the trail easement. The applicants were proposing a gate, but even the easement even prohibits putting up gates. So in order to accommodate the farming of this property and to be able to fence the entire property, it's proposed to be used as a nursery. There's a lot of deer damage in that area to nurseries, and the owner would like to fence it off. So we came up with the idea, which is similar to what we did on a farm parcel in Sagapanic, where we retained the trail easement, but we allowed the property owner to give the town a trail license that would go along the perimeter of the property rather than right through the middle of the property. So on this survey, you can see that the proposed trail license would go along the perimeter of the farmland and also along the edge of the road, and then go north and come out just south of where the current trail easement ends. By doing this, we don't give up the trail easement. We still have that. In the future, if this license agreement doesn't work out or there are conflicts with it, the town has the right to go back and use the original trail easement right here. So this would be the proposed easement. There's some trees along the road here. The trail can easily be placed within those trees. It doesn't require cutting down the trees along the road, therefore maintaining the view of these homeowners to this wooded edge along the field so that they won't see the proposed deer fence. I don't know if Jackson Dodds, the property owner, has gotten on yet, but if not, that's the presentation. I can answer some questions perhaps if you have any.
Yeah, I have a couple. This trail license, whatever you're calling it, along Deer Run, it doesn't seem to get back to the power lines.
No, it doesn't.
Because a lot of people, I mean, people mountain bike along those power lines all the time. You know, they're used by hikers, etc. So once you do that, now how do they get back to that power line? How do they? I'm assuming that the next trail will be along the power lines. You need to get up to the power lines with that.
Yeah, let me explain that. Right now, this trail easement is conditional. The public has no permission to walk on it because it doesn't continue. And the way our conditional trail easements are written, it only comes into play once that trail can be walked from one street to another street. So this easement is for the future. The trail license agreement would be for the future as well. So nothing happens either at this location or this location until we get a trail easement on this property right here.
No, when people go through they go under the power lines.
They have no permission to do that. It's private property.
But it's owned by what, LIPA or?
No, it's owned by Jackson Dodds, and LIPA has an easement on that property, just for LIPA purposes, however.
What's the property used for, Dave? Is it farmed or?
Mr. Dodds is going to plant a tree nursery here. He's in the business of landscaping, and he acquired this to plant his nursery.
Okay.
But it's a subdivision reserved area. So when you say
It's
here,
an agricultural reserve area. It's not being farmed right now because if you looked at the aerial photograph from about 2 years ago, this had totally overgrown with Russian olive. He went in and cleared out all the Russian olive so that it could be restored back to agriculture.
and now does you say he owns it? Was it or is it he doesn't own the fee? He leases the.
Nope, he owns the fee. As my understanding is, he owns the fee.
All right, so the housing subdivision actually sold this piece.
Probably,
Well,
yeah, that makes sense.
They sold the reserve. It's a subdivision reserve, so I'd have to look at what language and how it was reserved, but
Yeah, yeah.
And David, didn't you say there's a trail easement on this?
We have a trail easement right now that runs along this pink line.
So wouldn't that give residents the ability to cross this property on the town trail easement?
It would if it were not conditional. The condition is that this trail has to be extended with public access in order for the public to use this part of the trail. And until that happens, this easement is only conditional and the public has no right to use it.
And it's worth mentioning that the Trails Advisory Board has no issue with this.
It's very common with these trail easements that the planning board gets on subdivisions. You know, they're looking to the future, they're planning for future connections. And many times we don't have easements on the adjoining properties, but the planning board doesn't want to give up the opportunity to get, a potential continuous trail. So they get a conditional trail easement.
This is something similar, Dave, to what we did with Lee Foster with our property over there.
This is exactly what we had with Lee Foster. Lee
Yeah.
Foster's, however, was not conditional because we did have contiguous linkages. So the public did have a right to walk through the middle of that farm field. It was creating conflicts with the trail going through the middle of the field.
Yeah,
and the solution was to accept a trail license agreement that went around the perimeter of that property.
Sure, right. You can't run a farm with people walking through the middle of your farm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah.
And the only intention is that your problem is just too great to have a tree farm that, well, the deer will eat the trees, right? The sapling.
Correct.
So you need a fence.
Yeah.
Because of the deer. Okay.
Any kind of farming at this point, you fence.
But let me, can I understand this?
Problem.
Yeah, I'm a little confused about that as well. But you still have the LIPA easement to service the power lines.
Yes.
Yeah, that's up.
And the applicants are proposing to put gates at the LIPA easement so that the LIPA vehicles can get into the fenced ag reserve and maintain the power lines.
Okay.
I mean, my only real issue
is to have an easement across the land is my point. Yeah.
And we wouldn't be giving up the easement. We would have, in addition to it, a trail license, right?
That's correct. The easement stays in place. If the license doesn't work out or the applicant changes their mind or the town changes their mind, we can go back to this original easement.
My only concern is that that license doesn't reach back to the power line area, so that if we get to that next piece at some point, where would we want that trail? And we probably would not want it so close to the houses. We'd want it where the power lines are.
That's correct. So if the town were to acquire this property or we got an easement, we would extend the easement from where the license ends. Oops. We could extend it from, on this property, we would get a trail easement that goes from here up to the power lines. And then we would continue on the power lines.
Is that privately held, that piece of property?
This piece is privately held still, yes.
Okay.
Why wouldn't, Dave, why wouldn't we just angle that last bit of that trail license so it reached up?
We could do that, and we had actually discussed that with the applicant. That could be done.
Yeah, that seems better. It sounds like that's a wooded little section there anyway in that corner, and have the trail license re-meet the trail easement right over there. Yeah.
So is the current owner of that little piece you'd mentioned, Dave, earlier, that this it potentially could be bought by CPF? Has there been any discussion with that owner of that little corner there? Are they potentially a willing seller on that basis?
I don't know the answer to that, Councilman. We could talk to CPF. There may be title issues with this property. It's owned by a long time Southampton family, and a lot of these older town families, the titles in these properties are kind of confused, and that would be my guess as to why this property has never been developed. It's landlocked, and there may be title issues with it.
Okay, yeah, it would be good to find that out if we could, if we brought it to CPF.
Dave, well, first, what I was saying is not necessarily to have that 90-degree turn at the end, but just sort of, take that angle exactly at that point, continue that up to that, the power lines. But if you go back out for a second, in the entire property, it looks like some of the clearing occurred off of the easement, the ag reserve on another lot there, a flag lot.
Yeah, I do see that. I don't know whether they also own this property or not.
So where are they proposing the deer fencing?
They're not proposing to fence that flag lot. The deer fence comes around just the ag reserve. So the deer fence would be right along this. The deer fence is the red line, basically.
Okay, I got it.
There are two separate owners listed in our GIS system.
Yeah, so.
For this flag lot parcel?
I mean, they're both LLCs. Yeah, but they're two different LLCs, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that's cleared up there, but it's not being proposed to be farmed as part of this nursery. The previous owner may have encroached into that property.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Okay, we have prepared a license agreement. The town attorney's office has prepared that. The applicants have signed that agreement. So following this work session, at some point on the town board agenda, there would be a resolution then to authorize the supervisor to sign the license agreement if you're so inclined.
Well, I would be inclined if it were modified to reach back to the power lines.
Okay, we can talk to the applicant about doing that. I don't think they'll object to that.
Okay. So it starts at the power lines and ends at the power lines, but takes a more circuitous route to get there.
Okay.
So Dave, you don't think that there's going to be some issue with the encroachment on the north side of this picture up there, that little area?
I don't, because the current owner is not proposing to fence that. They're not proposing to use that. As I said, I think that's probably residual clearing or residual farmed area that the prior owners had encroached onto this lot.
But would he have objection if I'm just trying to understand what's involved there, because he may have some objections to having that fenced. because it's unclear who owns what here.
Well, Jackson Dodds owns this area right here.
Right.
And this is his property line, the red line. And he's
Okay.
proposing the fence right on that property line. Now, granted, that fence will be very visible in this location here.
Yes. I'm just trying to anticipate the unforeseen consequence. Somebody will object or have, questions as to why that's happening. It might obstruct their view, or I don't know. People have issues with things like that. But I do agree with the supervisor that you really need to have that trail connect up where you're showing up there.
Okay.
I do think one of the reasons why it wasn't done, just because we've had this conversation about this, is that currently there is a lot of ATV use on the property, and the property that you want to connect to is privately owned property. So having the trail in essence go to private property was potentially an issue.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, Cindy.
The power lines are used a lot by ATVs. So
Yeah.
currently there's ATVs driving straight up the power lines right through the middle of this property.
Right.
So this basically where it ends, because it can't be, like, nobody can go onto that property because it's private property. The thought was stopping the trail there would keep people off of that. Instead of giving them a pathway onto private property, it would end. Do you know what I'm saying? Instead of going up to the power lines and giving a pathway through onto this trail that's on private property, it's not, we don't have an easement on that trail.
I see what you're saying. So conceivably the ATVs might start using because they won't be able to go through here anymore. It's going to be totally fenced.
So they'll ride along the road and back up to the power line.
They'll ride along this road or along the trail that we cut here, and they'll go up to here and then get to the power line again.
Right.
Well, if we acquired that property through CPF and then just, used bollards to make it impossible to use ATVs only as a walking trail. That's what's being proposed now, right, Dave? Only a walking trail.
That's correct. It's only for walking.
So you'd have to have, to Cindy's point, you'd have to have something to block the, ATVs using that as an alternative once they're cut off from the LIPA easement.
They would cut it. Yeah, they would go right through the woods there and reach the power lines again.
Yeah, I'm just saying you're not making an access point.
Right.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people also ride bikes along the power lines. They're pretty popular for mountain bikers. So, you're denying them the ability to use the power lines too. I think it would be, because I hear what you're saying, Cindy, that it would just sort of discourage ATV use of the power lines, but that short section of woods they'd cut through anyway. And
I agree.
I think that it would make sense, since we have a trail easement on this property and we're doing this license, that it would get us from point A to point B, the same 2 points that the easement provides for, the license should provide for.
Okay, we can
technically, anyone using a mountain bike or a ATV on the LIPA easement is actually, that's illegal to do, right?
ATV, certainly. I don't think there's any place where you can legally ride the ATVs. Mountain bikes, I'm not sure. We'd have to look at the easement.
With LIPA, right? See what their easement allows.
Yeah. The LIPA is really their own. I mean, it's overhead, so they may need, LIPA itself might not be concerned about that, but we can look at what our trail easement says.
Yeah, the current trail easement says
clarified.
Recreational trail activities such as hiking, jogging, running, horseback riding, cross-country skiing, and non-motorized bicycle riding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, especially with the fat tires now, people really can pretty much go anywhere on those things. Yeah.
All right, Charles, I don't know if Mr. Dodds is on or not.
He is not.
He's not. All right. I called him and he was having trouble getting on. But we can talk to him about amending the survey to show the license agreement connecting to the power where the current easement ends. And I don't think it requires changes to the license agreement. The license agreement just refers to the survey. So when we amend the survey, the agreement is still good. So do you want us to bring this back to you, or do you want to just, you could authorize the supervisor at a later meeting to sign this, and the supervisor could confirm that the Schedule C, which shows the location of the license agreement, has been modified to connect to the power line.
I'd like to do.
Fine with that.
Yeah, I'm fine
That's
with
fine.
So we do a resolution authorizing me to sign the trail license.
Correct.
And that would be, you're saying that the current trail easement is sort of a springing easement. It's there, but it can't really be used by the public. Will this trail license be immediately usable by the public?
No, it maintains the same restrictions as the easement. It's also conditional.
Yeah, and so, yeah, even more reason why we need to get it connected back to the same point, because we're more likely to get the next easement where the power lines are.
Correct.
Otherwise, it's some chance that it would never get triggered. Okay. All right, thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we're only 10 minutes behind now. Getting better. All right, do we have Len on the call? Let's stop screen sharing here.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to get stop share and I'm trying to leave.
All right, and there is Len. So the next item has to do with the 2022 town borrowing plan. I guess that's the capital plan. So Len, do you want to introduce this?
Sure. As you know, the board adopted a capital budget in November, and that capital budget anticipated borrowing money. And we typically go out to borrow in May after our financial statements have been adopted. But given the current market conditions, I think it's best that we push this borrowing ahead as soon as possible to save interest, because the current thinking is that interest rates are on the rise, and the quicker we can lock in an issuance of bonds, the better off we'd be. So I kind of laid out a summary of what's out there. Jay, I don't know if you have that, because I can't share my screen on my iPad. So there was a couple of documents that I gave you. That was like 3 or 4 documents or something. I don't know if you want to share them. I mean, I could just talk about them.
Let me see if I have them for a second.
All right, you keep looking and I'll keep talking.
I don't know when were they sent?
Yesterday or the day before. I sent it to you and Jackie.
Did you send it to my personal or just the town?
The town. All right, so anyway.
I don't have it.
All right, I can just talk. It's fine. So we have the current capital plan, which includes 10,167,000 of public improvement serial bonds that need to be issued. You know, they've been authorized for various purposes throughout the town. You know, they include some of the big ones are the Southampton ambulance facility, reconstruction of town roads, traffic safety improvements at various locations, $1 million, Construction of a new heated garage and storage facility at the police department, $1 million. Part of the cost of improvements for the town-owned lobster marina, the marina portion of the by the lobster inn, $1 million. New parking management system, 500,000. There's schedules that I mean, a lot of detailed schedules. So I mean, it's part of what we adopted in December as far as our bond resolutions. So the total schedule, which I will provide, will, you know, when there's a resolution, if you folks want to see it, it lists all the projects that were adopted in the budget process. So that totals $10,167,000. We're also looking to do bond anticipation notes, and what those are, instead of long-term bonds, the first ones are going to be public improvement serial bonds. So those would be longer length bonds, basically the life of the project, you know, maybe 10, 15, as far as 20 years, depending on what project it is. The second portion of it is a $4,700,000 in bond anticipation notes, which are short-term borrowing vehicles, which are like 1 year notes. And what that's going to be comprised of is $1 million for the Southampton Ambulance District and $3.7 million in the Hampton Bays Water District. And the reason why we're going with notes on those is, as you're aware, we were building a new Southampton ambulance facility, and once that's constructed, the idea is to sell the old facility. So rather than borrow for the full amount of the construction for 20 years, say, it makes sense just to borrow for what we think is an estimate that we can get for the sale of the old building. And then once we sell that old building, we'll use those proceeds to pay off this bond anticipation note. Okay. So the same is true with the Hampton Bays Water District. You know, we're borrowing a lot of money for the cross canal connections and stuff. So we also applied to New York State Clean Water grants, which we think we are eligible. So we're hoping to receive a grant somewhere around 3.7 million, hopefully 4 million. But what I thought conservatively is I would borrow short-term 3.7 million, hopefully being reimbursed when we hopefully receive the grant. And if we don't receive the grant, then I can convert those short-term borrowing to long-term debt. But I don't want to saddle the district with long-term debt, not with kind of the knowledge that there's a good chance that we're going to get a grant on that. Also, the third area of financing that I'm putting forward is we have $4.5 million of outstanding debt that was issued in 13 and 14, and it's eligible now for me to do a refunding. So what a refunding is the interest rate on those bonds is higher than I can currently get if I kind of refinance it, kind of like a mortgage where you refinance your mortgage, but in public finance, we call it a refunding. So there's $4.5 million outstanding on that. So what I'd like to do is kind of refinance that, and we'd receive some savings that we would then pass along to the various tax jurisdictions that we're going to refinance. There's a bunch of it's not just in the general fund, it's in the highway, it's in general fund, it's in different funds that we're going to be refinancing the $4.5 million with. So
you would do that without extending the life of the bond.
Yeah, New York State, yeah, general municipal, the finance laws don't allow you to extend the term. So all you're eligible to do is refinance it, but you have to show savings, and that's obviously what we're doing here. So we're going to accrue some savings. So there'll be about a $20 million bond issuance that we're going to be looking to go to the market with. And I wanted to brief everybody because that's going to be taking place over the next several days. I'll go several weeks, but I'll take questions now, and then I can go into a timetable as to what we're doing.
And the money borrowed for the Hampton Bays Water District, that's only 1 year?
Yeah, well, there are some borrowings that we're doing longer term because there are stuff that I know we're not going to get grants for.
Okay.
So those items we went out 10 or 15 years on a term, but then there are things that like this. We submitted. We had H2M submit a grant application, and they feel pretty confident that it meets all the criteria for this clean water drinking water grant. So,
okay.
And this is infrastructure upgrades, right? These are the subaqueous crossings that we're doing.
Yeah. There's two of them. One going over, I think, Shinnecock, and the other one going out to the barrier island underneath Ponquag Bridge.
Yeah, the directional drilling for the, right. One that's going to go underneath the canal and over at Mashute Beach area.
Len, is this the one you wanted me to share?
Well, there was less detailed ones. There was a Word document. They were all in that same attachment. If you just look,
I got them all. This is the more complicated one, but these has all the projects.
yeah, that's the details. That's the details. You don't. The simpler one would be the schedule of authorization and purpose. That's on a Word document, I think. Or
Yeah, I think I got them all now. So, the summary, just the three projects.
There's one. It might be on an Excel spreadsheet. It's one. It's the authorization and purpose, and it adds up to 10,167,000. And then there's also one with the refinancing, which is the 4,007,000.
All right, so
There should be like 2 spreadsheets and a couple of Word docs.
yeah, there's a number of things. So
Yeah, no, this stuff gets kind of complicated because there's a lot of numbers, but it all summarizes up. Thank God.
maybe is it this one here?
Yeah, that's good. That looks like something. Yep. Okay, so when I mentioned the $10 million in bonds, this is all new borrowing. So this is stuff that we're going to borrow on that was authorized by the board in December. And it's for all of these projects. So that adds up to the 10,167,000. And like I said, on the bottom, those are the larger projects, but you can see we're borrowing for a lot of the general purpose governmental functions that we're doing. And this would be our annual borrowing. Now, keep in mind, this is lower than our actual capital budget because, as you recall, we pay for a lot of things in cash. And we also have a debt reduction policy, which requires us to use 75% of our excess fund balance numbers that that were the result of operations. So last year that resulted in us having over $2 million in excess fund balance. So we applied that towards our capital budget this year. So we're instead of borrowing right now, say 13 million, I don't have the exact schedule in front of me. We're only having to borrow 10 million because of that policy. So that was a great tool that we instituted a few years back. So these are some of the projects, and if anybody has any questions on these projects, I can attempt to answer them.
Just one piece about that debt reduction policy. So yeah, we could only use it to offset anticipated borrowing. So we can't use it for spending that we hadn't thought of. The last quarter we could, but not the 3 quarters.
Correct.
So these are all projects that we had already anticipated bonding for.
Correct.
So can I stop sharing here?
Sure.
Anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
So Len, in terms of what you need from us, is it just letting us know that these bonding resolutions are coming forward? You want to hit the market early.
Yeah, there's one more Word document. If you could share it, it's a document from Unistat. It just kind of has a timetable. I'd just like to go over that quickly.
I don't know that I pulled that in.
Okay.
There was.
All right, well,
There's I have a Word document from you.
no, then there's another doc.
Yeah, I saw something in the original email, but
it's okay. I'll just talk. So basically, what we have to do now, the process, I just want to lay it out. We have to get a bond rating from, when we all talk about our AAA rating and whatnot. So we have to get a new rating now. So we're prepared, right? We're currently in the process of preparing our projected financials, our previous financial statements, a whole bunch of documents that go into what's called our official statement. That's like it's a big document that gets distributed to the market. So the supervisor and myself will be making a presentation to Standard & Poor's because we're going to get rated from S&P this time. We generally alternate back between S&P and Moody's. So we're looking forward to doing a presentation the first week in February for Standard & Poor's. And then on February 8th meeting, your February 8th meeting, the board, yeah, there you go.
Can people see that whole thing or no?
No, just the top is showing.
All right, let me try. How about now? Can you see still can't see the whole thing?
Not me.
Nope.
How about now?
I'll just talk about it.
Can you see it now?
No, Jay, yeah.
All right. Now?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I think I see, because you're getting it off my email. Let me stop sharing for a second. I have it up on my desktop. I maybe I picked the wrong one. Here we go. Let's try that.
There you go. Bingo.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so right, so we're going to be doing our presentation. I'm up over the top of this, like in February, the beginning of February, and then on February 8th, the board has a meeting, and in order for us to do the refunding, we'll have a resolution in front of the board that has to be adopted by a supermajority that allows us to do that. Then we'll have a ratings calls, and like February 9th, that we'll get a rating back towards the end of February. And then we're going to have a day of sale. We're hoping to have like February 24th. So hopefully the market is still in a favorable tone. I mean, it's going to be what it is. I mean, but hopefully it's as good as it can be on the 24th. And we should close on the bonds by March 9th. And so there'll be a bunch of financial transactions that will happen towards the end of February, beginning of March, that Jay, you'll have to sign, and we'll be working with our bond counsel and our financial advisors to put this all together. That's all I have. I'm here for any questions. It's kind of bread and butter financial stuff, which is what I do, but it could be confusing a little bit. But these little details sometimes save us a lot of money. So
just one question on our debt reduction policy, Len, because last year you had us go out to the bond market early as well. And I know that worked out really well for us, but it created a complexity in our debt reduction policy, because normally we would go out to the bond market after you reconciled the prior year's books. So the money that you're applying to offset borrowing is actually the money from last year's reconciliation, not
correct.
This year's reconciliation. So we're going to end up with the same situation. And I think this year our unanticipated surplus was actually significantly higher than the year before. So, so at some point, maybe next year, we'll have an even larger allocation. Or if we do another round of borrowing later this year, we'll have a larger allocation. Is that right?
That's correct. There's a lot of things that are in play when you look at our debt service. We've been steadily declining in the amount that we've been borrowing over the years. When I started with the town 10 plus years ago, we had 160 million in outstanding debt. Right now, we're about 80 million. That's pretty good. So, and we're continuing to drop based on some of these policies, the pay-as-you-go policy, the debt reduction policy. Every time we borrow things, we're making sure that they're long-lived assets. And if not, we're paying for them in cash. So we actually have a bunch of things that are falling off our debt service schedules now in the next budget cycle. So I'm going to be making some other proposals to reduce our debt further, including the highway department, where there are a lot of recurring borrowings that we can probably start to eliminate and get on a cash basis in there as well. So I think in the long term, these financial changes, they take a long time to implement, but once they're in place, they really affect the bottom line so that your tax dollars aren't spent on interest and expense. They're going directly towards program services and et cetera. So the back end, which is not really visible to a lot of people, you have to pay attention to those details in order for it to really free up money on your front end where you can spend it on things, highway equipment, services for the public, parks, etc. So that's what we attempt to do in the controller's office.
Do we still have CPF debt, or is that all paid off?
That's all done.
It is?
Yeah, I'm actually going to put forth a resolution as well. I don't think I listed it there because it really wasn't to do with these finances. We have a bunch of authorized but unissued debt. So I'm going to probably cancel a bunch of that authorizations, so that just shouldn't be out there. I don't need authorization to borrow. I don't know. There's like $5 to $7 million of stuff that we're never going to issue. So I'm going to cancel those authorizations. There'll be another resolution for that.
Any other questions for Len?
Yeah, I do have a question. I love this, especially the tax anticipation notes with the short-term borrowing. I believe it's a huge savings. With the Southampton Ambulance District, the tax anticipation note is predicated on the sale of the existing property. I do have a concern if, what if the property doesn't sell? I guess we could issue or request another note, another bond.
Yeah, I'm going to move my office there, Tommy John.
If they use that thing, it's time for them to go. And
we actually, we visited the property, and it actually is not a bad garage. I mean, if the town needed a facility in that area of the town, it could be considered something that we might want to acquire ourselves. So I don't think there's a problem. I think it's very marketable. If we don't get $1 million, you'll get $750. The land is worth a good amount of money, just the land. So.
Okay, I do too. All right, thank you.
Which property were you talking about, Tom John?
The Southampton, the existing Southampton ambulance building, right? They've swapped the land because they had vision years ago and they purchased another piece of property. And so we are going to issue a tax anticipation note, assuming that we, the Southampton Ambulance District in the town of Southampton, sell the existing property with the Morton building that they currently have their ambulance in now.
Okay.
Good. Awesome.
Okay.
All right, anything else? All right. Thank you, Len.
Thanks, Len.
Thanks, Len.
All right. Gotta get back to the agenda here. All right. So we are, right back on schedule.
Right, yeah.
Wow.
You guys are like a Swiss watch today.
Well, we went over and then under, but I give Janice Wilson in my office some kudos for making the numbers work here. So it's 1:03 and we're at the 1 o'clock item at the which is executive session. So we have acquisitions to discuss, and we have some confidential legal advice and some personnel matters that need to get discussed. And we will do that primarily on a conference call. And you've all been supplied the number and the access code, but some of what we're doing later with 2 of those properties does require some visuals. So we will have some times when we go to private Zoom meetings as well. And you should have all of that information, correct? Everybody have all the information they need?
Yes.
All right, is there any other business before we end the regular work session? Okay, then I will make a motion to end our work session and go into executive session to discuss the items I mentioned.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Bouvier, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are